and you'd hear a lot like, hey, when are you going to get a real job? And I think a lot of my team hears that a lot. And I actually try to talk about this at every opening because I think this is as real as it gets, and whether people decide to stay in the hospitality industry or do something different, the connectivity and the connective tissue of like doing this work is this like unbelievable thing. And I think COVID, like, I'm a glass half full kind of gal, but like one of the many things it gave us was this perspective of like the work that we do. Because in COVID, people were like, what do you miss the most about being stuck at home? And it was like my friends, my family, restaurants. Right. We were like in the top, 3-5 things that people were missing. And it made me have this moment where it's like knowing the role that we play in people's lives, in the sense that like this is a table that we create, this maestro that we bring, the thousands and thousands of things that have to happen to do this for a group of people or a person, and then they get to have their biggest moments here. Right. Go on a first date, decide to take a job, buy a house, move, see their family member they haven't, celebrate their special moments. I mean, 99% of people, I really would rate it that high, want to be at our restaurants.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, co-founder and CEO of Upward Projects, Lauren Bailey. Lauren, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I feel like I need a Red Bull after that intro.
Yeah, I bring it. You gotta start strong.
Let me sit up a little straighter.
All right, I have that effect. Andy Forsheimer told me to talk to you.
And, my homie.
And Andy, man, what an episode he was. What a smart guy he is. Lots of respect for Andy. When people like Andy say you need to talk to this person, and I don't ask Andy, he just comes out of the blue and says you need to talk to this person, I say absolutely, please, Andy, thank you. And we made it happen. We're here. I can't wait to dive into your story to find out who you are and how you got to where you are today. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
My mantra is that anytime you're facing something that you don't know if you should go for it, you should do it, you should ask for help, you should ask for the thing, stop the thing, create a boundary, whatever it is. Even could be something as simple as like get a person's number. Like, I like that guy's hot, I want to go get his number, right? Our brains work really well at talking us out of things. And if we're able to stop and talk ourselves into things, and the way that I do that is you have to quantify like what's worst case scenario. If you can figure out what that is relatively quickly, and if you can handle that, then you go for it. And the reality of it is that 99% of stuff you can handle. Yeah. So you can go for it.
Worst case scenario is usually no.
Exactly. And if you didn't ask, you already had a no, hypothetically, right, because you didn't even ask. And so I think that people think, oh, that person's too busy, or they won't say yes, or they won't do that. Or, we'll go on this long journey of like why something can't be or why it won't work before we ever even give the thought of like, what if I don't do this, right? Like if I don't ask for the thing, what could happen?
Yeah. I'm listening, or just listened to The Power of Now, and what you're sharing with me kind of is ringing true to that book. Just the idea of just don't worry about what could happen. Don't worry about what has happened. Worry about taking action right now. Yeah. And just put all of your energy into doing the damn thing.
If you're in a meeting with me, it's kind of a known fact, and you're like working with me and you tell me something's going on, and there's a problem, I'm like reaching for my phone to do something in that moment. Like, and they're like, wait a second.
Yeah. If you can't do it now, at least put it on your to-do list, right? Yeah. Get it out. That's why I love Boomerang. Have you ever used Boomerang?
No, what's that?
It's just this app where you it's one tap and it brings you to a page, and then with a second tap you can do a voice to like text, and then with a third tap it goes to your inbox as a reminder.
Really?
So, yeah, one tap, record, one tap, inbox, so you don't forget. So it's just like a path of least resistance to not forget to do something that pushes to your email inbox, which is where you're always looking.
I can be done with this podcast now that
I've
gotten this value already in the first 13 seconds. You install it and it works on your phone, like for anything.
Where is my phone? Did I leave it in my car?
You can show me later.
No.
You can have it in your phone, your iWatch too?
There it is.
Dang.
It's right here. It's called, see, it's right there. It looks like a little boomerang. So I put it where my thumb can most reach it. One tap. I'm talking to Lauren Bailey. Send.
Is that how you're so organized with no assistant?
Organized.
I felt like this was extremely organized. Leading up to today, like you had confirmations, you had like, here's what to expect. You're like on your time. Like,
I think repetition helps. When you do it 1,080 times, you start to kind of get ahead of the ball a little bit.
I don't know if I'm buying that. I think you had a plan from day one. Like the moment you're like, you know what you're doing. You're like, even when the first call we had, you're like, all right, you're like my therapist. Like as we end, as time wraps up, I'm like, okay.
This is. I mean, I can't wait to dive into your story. I'm already having fun with you. This is a lot of fun. But where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
What do you want to know?
When did you say to yourself, I want to own a restaurant?
Oh, I was shaking a martini in Nantucket.
Ooh, Nantucket.
But let's back up. I began working in the restaurant because my parents got divorced. My dad stopped paying for my school, and I went to out-of-state school at ASU.
Yep.
And my mom
From
being
Indiana?
Yeah, well, yes, but I had been living in Orlando for like a year, which was terrible. I was like not a fan of that place for me. I had to get out of there pretty quick and came here. But the interesting thing was my mom, like, you know, just couldn't really do it without his support. And she's like, Lauren, look, you're going to have to get a job and help me out here or come home and go to state school. And I did not want to do that. I was having a blast at ASU. So I made a fake resume and I went to PF Chang's, which there were 2 of at the time. And it was very busy. I don't know if you were around during that, but it was like 2-hour wait, like crazy.
I don't know. Was it that big in the Northeast? I'm from New Hampshire. I knew.
No, it took a long time to get over there, but right. Like it was a bunch of Rick Federico ultimately, who became one of my best friends and mentors, took over the helm leading that company and took it from
Federico, that sounds super familiar.
He's a titan of a human in every way. You should interview him.
I should.
He's going to be so mad I said that. He's like the most humble person on the planet. Nice. Andy knows him well too. Anyway, so they hire me. The guy gets to the end of the shift and he's like, "You've never worked in a restaurant before, have you?" Because here's me like flailing around. They're like 86 this, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the, what have I gotten into? In my mind, it was like, look, I can go to school during the day. I can work at night. This place looks busy. Awesome. Anyway, he busts me and he's like, "You never worked in a restaurant." And I was like, "I know, but I really need this job. And if you teach me, like, I'll do anything you say."
Did you lie? You said you lied during the interview?
The full thing. I made this like full resume that looked like I was like the most seasoned waiter on the planet. I'm sure they were just desperate for any warm bodies, as I have been in many times.
Yeah, seasoned like you knowing the restaurant industry now can tell if somebody's worked in the restaurant industry almost instantly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely on the training shift for sure. I didn't know the lingo, nothing. But anyway, he slams down this like huge binder on the table. He's like, "Memorize this overnight, and better come back knowing it." So I like drive home on my bike and pound like a thing of no-dos, which if you remember when we were younger, that's like the olden day 5-hour energy. And come back the next day, memorize everything in the binder. And he never told anybody. Like it's a sliding doors thing. Like I think about, had he narked me out, I probably would have gotten spooked and like never come back to the restaurant industry.
Yeah. So how long did you spend with Federico?
Well, he wasn't there. He was in the high up, but like he was around. He would come in and stuff, but they kept growing that business, and it went from 2 units in Arizona to $1 billion publicly traded company. It was a really cool story.
You saw, I don't know if you noticed me pulling up my notes. It's Andrew and Peggy are there behind that restaurant, right? So they were called out by somebody, Ray Villeman, to be a future guest on the show, and I'm hot on their heels. I would love to get them on
the Federicos. Peggy, his wife.
What do I have here written down?
Peggy's Rick's wife.
I have Andrew and Peggy Churn.
I don't know them. No, you want to talk to Rick. He lives here. If he's in town.
Heard. Research. Done.
He's amazing.
Back to your story.
Anyway, so then I ended up going into fine dining from there. And I was just going through school, getting an art degree and a communication degree. And I spent my last semester, when I worked in the fine dining places, really, I mean, I grew up in a Southern home. So my mom was teaching me how to make pies like from day one when I was 7 years old. And I always loved food, like Southern food, because I was born in Texas. But when I went to House of Tricks, which was the fine dining restaurant I started in, that's when I really started to learn about that type of restaurants and that type of cuisine. And then I started cooking. I used to do Sunday night family dinners for my friends. And from there, and then I went my senior year of college to Italy, and I lived there for a year, which that just continued to seal my like love of food.
So what, you graduate in
02.
02.
Yeah.
From 02 to 09. You're doing all of this because you opened your first restaurant in 09, right? Or 08, I think.
So I came back from Europe, and I had worked in a few fine dining restaurants here with Mark Tarbell, with the House of Tricks that they just actually tore down. It was really sad. And then I worked at Sam Fox's restaurant, and I'll definitely, I'm sure, touch on him and his impact on my life at some point. But then I went to, I ended up like meeting this guy randomly who was a friend of mine that I worked with at another restaurant. Again, sliding doors. And he had worked in Nantucket that summer. And he's like, "I made $30,000 in one summer." So I say to my best friend, Angelique, I'm like, "Dude, I don't know where Nantucket is, but we should break up with our boyfriends and sell all our stuff and go there before we move to New York." So
So why did you want to go to New York? I guess you'll get there.
I got into graduate school at Parsons and Pratt for art.
Okay.
And so I was going to do grad school.
Got it. So,
and she was planning on moving back to the city. And so we were like, let's just do this stopover in Nantucket this summer. We'll make a bunch of money and then we'll move to the city.
How old are you during this?
22, 21 at this time.
Straight out of college.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So all this experience you spoke about up to this point was working while in college.
Yeah. Full-time job, getting 2 degrees in 4 years.
Damn.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I honestly, I didn't really, intend to get 2 degrees. I just took a lot of art classes because I liked it. And then my advisor said, look, if you take another couple classes, you can get a whole nother degree in art and studio art. So I was like, that sounds pretty
Tempting,
easy.
right?
Yeah. In Italy. Sure. Anyway, so we literally sold all our stuff. We had no money. We slept in a Friendly's parking lot in Hyannisport, before we could catch the ferry. She got up in the morning and went to breakfast, and I wake up, look over, and she's gone. I'm like, I've been abducted. But we had the best time ever. And then fast forward to your question about when I knew it was shaking a martini one night, and I'm like, I don't really want to go to grad school. I'm going to be in more debt. I really like Nantucket. I love this business. It has everything I love. It's people, design, food, fast paced, and then I looked at the people that owned the restaurant American Seasons. They were really awesome. And they kind of came up through, like I did, through the business, and were running it. And I thought look, if they could do it, I can figure it out. Right. And this is one of the key pieces I think that's hard about entrepreneurship now, is that back then, this is 2002, you couldn't really Google how hard is it to open a restaurant, right, and how expensive is it? Which I think at the time, had I done that, I probably would have talked myself out of it.
Yeah. That's a big reason why this podcast exists, because there just wasn't a ton of resources out there. I mean, but yeah, 100%. I secretly am trying to talk people out of it. I think that a lot of people knew what it took, and they knew the reality. I think a lot of people are glorified with the restaurant industry. They have a false representation or a false idea of what it's actually like. They like to have dinner parties. Yeah. And they like to have friends and company, and every night's a party. But the reality is, it's way more than that.
I think they think I like to eat out in restaurants, so therefore I would be right, this work or this thing would be eating out in restaurants, and it's the opposite of that. I mean,
even just maybe give them perspective of what it actually takes to really, do you really want the reality of owning a restaurant?
You become extremely non-enjoyable to eat dinner with anymore from now on. If I really want to talk to someone, I will not take them to one of my restaurants, because the whole time I'm there, I'm like, what is that guy doing? Yeah. Can you come here? Can you bring me a side of that? I don't think that dressing room. You're just a terrible individual.
If you listen to or if you watch my podcast, you'll see that I always have my guests face a wall. I make sure that I'm facing the dining room and that they're looking at a wall.
Because they're trailing off. I'll be right back.
They're hold on, someone's at the door. They're waiting too long. I'll be right back. So you're basically slowly falling in love with the industry. It came out of a place of necessity, but because you are a creative person, like you said, the people, the design, the projects, you start to realize that this could be a spot for you as a creative outlet. Maybe more opportunity for a creative outlet than the actual world of art, because of how you think the restaurant industry is competitive.
Yeah,
so. But
you can actually make money at it,
right?
I think that the thing too was interesting was that I had been told, always along the way, I was really lucky. I had a parent that was really supportive. My mom thinks that the sun shines out of my body. She's just whatever. And I think a lot of parents would have been hey, she asked me a couple times, hey, what's the plan here? You're still waiting tables after school and stuff. And what's going to happen? And you'd hear a lot hey, when are you going to get a real job? And I think a lot of my team hears that a lot. And I actually try to talk about this at every opening, because I think this is as real as it gets, and whether people decide to stay in the hospitality industry or do something different, the connectivity and the connective tissue of doing this work is this unbelievable thing. And I think COVID, I'm a glass half full kind of gal, but one of the many things it gave us was this perspective of the work that we do. Because in COVID, people were what do you miss the most about being stuck at home? And it was my friends, my family, restaurants. Right. We were in the top, 3-5 things that people were missing. And it made me have this moment where it's knowing the role that we play in people's lives, in the sense that this is a table that we create, this maestro that we bring, the thousands and thousands of things that have to happen to do this for a group of people or a person. And then they get to have their biggest moments here. Right. Go on a first date, decide to take a job, buy a house, move, see their family member they haven't, celebrate their special moments. I mean, 99% of people, I really would rate it that high, want to be at our restaurants.
Yeah, and we're by nature social creatures, and I think that we don't recognize how badly, like a anteater doesn't recognize its nose, and a fish doesn't recognize its fins or the water it's in. We don't recognize how much we need to be around people and how important it is for us to bump up and socialize with people. It's a part of what we are, who we are.
Yep.
We're social creatures. We're pack animals. And we don't need it until we don't have it, and then we're like, where did my fucking nose go?
Yeah.
Like my beak is gone. My flippers are gone. I can't swim.
Yeah.
And until you have those things removed, you don't realize you need it.
I think it's so true. I mean, we've been back in the office, like our corporate team, since June of 2020. And there was a slot of people that were like, we don't want to do this. We want to work hybrid. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, first of all, our teams are in the field. Secondly, there was just something in my gut that knew that you articulated really well. And, Alice Elliott ended up sending me this article about this because she knows I've been really passionate about this. Like, I just fundamentally don't understand it. Sure, there's a few jobs that you could do, like if a call center, like data entry, whatever, that you can do from home. But for the most part, that piece of that and like that like connection, the bond, the collaboration, all the things that happen, but even more so because if you want to grow, to me, I tell my team, I'm like, look, this is not a selfish thing. They're like, well, my productivity is higher. I'm like, listen, let me be clear. I'm okay trading some of your productivity for you to be collaborative, connected, for you to be able to see the people interacting that you aspire to be in, whether that's a seat, and like, you're not going to learn that on a screen,
right?
And I think that part of it for us was like, I think we've had a lot of really good results for that. Not to say we didn't lose people, because some people were not about it. And they're like, look, I'm not doing that. Okay, I get it.
You don't have to convince me. There's a reason why I live in a truck camper and drive around the country. This is so much better than staring. Like, I would have been like zoned out 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, you'd be checking your email and like your texts and stuff.
And like, there's some like the level of communication that happens from an email or a Zoom call versus there's things that are happening at this table right now that we're not even aware of. I mean, there's the body language, which was subtle, like it's like sublevel awareness, but then there's like the actual chemicals that our bodies are putting out. That's like that we're just beginning to realize what's going on there. And there's actually now scientific evidence that our hearts are radiating like literal energy, and that when we're in a physical proximity, you feel like there's things that we're just scraping the surface about how deep it goes to be in the same space as somebody. Like, it's wild.
I know, I'm about it. And I think that's like the piece that, I always want our teams to remember, because it is a hard business. But again, like, I'm not about like, oh, just, lately it feels like a lot of my restaurant friends are like, oh, it's so hard, like, and I'm like, did I miss something and it was easy? Like, did I miss that span of time?
Yeah, when was it easy?
I just don't I don't subscribe to that. I feel like it's like sticks on me, and I'm like, I don't want to like, I don't know. I think, look, it's like an opportunity always. There's always these things that are going to be challenged by us. It's like at the very nature, you sort of like pain if you choose this in a way that's like, I like to solve things. I love hard stuff. Like when people tell me, oh, I don't know, that doesn't work. Or when you did earlier, like, we can't do that. I'm like, oh, like my brain will start like trying to figure out a way of like, how would I do this? Like, what could I do?
Well, that's the frontal lobe kicking in the front. Like when you say it's not possible, you told your brain to stop working.
Yeah,
that's the path. Like, your brain is designed to not do work because it's a energy machine. It sucks energy. So the evolutional default is say this isn't possible, so you don't waste energy. But if you choose to say it is possible, then the brain just keeps trying to find ways.
Yeah,
that frontal lobe kicks into hypergear, and like it will find a way. But 100% to what you're saying.
I think it's the creatives too, that they're getting more few and far between. And people ask me, like the old dean of the art school at ASU, the first time I ever met him, he's like, hey, I want to meet you because, there's creatives, they're going down in volume, but like the ones that actually figure out how to make money are unique. And what is it different about you? And to me, like creativity, a lot of people, when they hear that word, it's like, oh, do you know how to paint or draw? And it's like, no, dude. It's like, do you have like does your brain work in the way that's like this thing of what you just said, which is there's something going on. And then, I can't even tell you, every single day with my own team and out in the world, people will just accept that, oh, I can't do that, or, oh, that's not possible, or, oh, this is just what it is. I look at this like 95% of stuff is like, either you can do something about it, change it, fix it, solve it, get someone to do something outside what they maybe normally wouldn't do. Because there's always the creative solutions. I love the third option. Like, what's the third option? It's either yes, no, or and. Yeah. And I think creative people, that's why they're really successful in business. And creativity isn't just about drawing and art stuff. It's like the way your brain's wired.
Right. And I think what's like the compound on that, what happens when creative people get in the same room, and then it becomes like this multiplier effect of like, I have this idea. Oh, well, that idea spurred this idea. And when you have 10 people sitting in a room in a mastermind trying to solve the same problem, it's like, whoa, it's so powerful. It's so inspiring.
Well, someone could say one thing to you that like fundamentally alters what you're doing, the way you're doing it, the way you think about something that could effectively like change your whole world. And everyone who I know has had extreme success can literally like stop and close their eyes and think back to like these sliding door moments when they met someone, when someone said something to them, and it changed their life forever.
Right. Just takes one moment of like shifting gear, a perspective shift. You know, it's super powerful. Back to your story though, because I feel like we're at like the part of the conversation where I like to end up, which is just like, where are we going? What's happening? Like, what's the future look like? Back to your story. You're in Nantucket. You're shaking a drink. And you say to yourself, this might be my home. This industry might be my outlet because of the things you mentioned. Your love for people, your love for art and design, and I think you said projects too.
I just like hard stuff, yeah.
So
in that, like I said, you couldn't really Google that. So I thought I'll just work the next summer because my girlfriend Angelique and I spent all our money, and that's a different podcast on what we did. But I came back the next summer and did save $30,000, and I worked literally every day of the week. I worked 6 nights in American Seasons. I picked up a catering gig the seventh night because she wouldn't let me work 7 nights. And then I worked in a real estate office Monday through Friday in a store. Like I literally was working every day, all night, and saved $30,000 in like 3.5 months. And in my mind, honestly, I'm not joking. I thought I could probably open 2 restaurants with this. Like I had all this money. I have all these ideas. This is like pre-Pinterest too. So I would get every magazine, like every Architectural Digest, Dwell, Design, every food magazine. And I would clip all these papers and I would make these binders with those inserts. And I would put together these concepts with this stuff.
How long after college was this? If you graduated in 2002?
He's like 2000, early 2003.
Okay. So basically 2003 to 2000, do I have it as 2009? My notes got...
That's when we opened Postino Central.
So 6 years from when I want to do this to you make it happen. 6 years.
Well, 2 of those years we were building it. So like I would say it was actively happening
2007.
in 2007. Yeah. So I came back here in 2004. Yeah. And started...
So 4 years.
Yeah, so I had these binders anyway. So I'm like, I got this $30,000. I'm going to come back to Arizona and I'm going to like put this stuff together. And I end up like calling an old friend of mine that I used to work with. And I was like, hey, I need a job, but just like, I just want to work days. I want to like work on this stuff, whatever. And she's like, hey, you should go to this place called Postino. And because you can make really good money at lunch, which is like a unique thing. You can't really make good money at lunch.
Back in Arizona?
Yeah, I've moved back to Arizona at this point.
Okay. How were you just in Nantucket for a summer?
I was there 3 summers total.
3 summers total. So 03, 04, 05. Mm-hmm. How much money were you making?
Wait, let's see. So 2002, 3. Yeah, I guess it was 05. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. How much money were you making? Were you putting all this aside?
Yeah, I was working all the time. At the last summer. The first summer I messed around and like had a great time and like, did whatever. We would spend all the money. We'd go out to eat and like eat in these nice restaurants and whatever.
But the dream started to get more real.
Yeah. And then I went to New York that winter. The following winter, I came back to Arizona, ended up getting back together with the guy that I had broken up with. And that's why I came back here. Plus, I felt like this would be a good place to open a restaurant. There wasn't like a ton of really great stuff here at the time. Right. There was some, but there was not a ton. Yeah,
this is an interesting time for food. The time you're talking about, 05, it's just before the smartphone comes out, where I think the smartphone was a catalyst for like inspiration.
Huge.
Yeah, like
Yelp,
no matter
pictures.
Where exactly. No matter where you Yelp, Instagram, all these things, Facebook. Now we're no longer comparing ourselves to the people down the street in our market, but on the other side of the country, like what's happening in California, what's happening in New York, what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in Miami. Inspiration. Like the power of minds coming together, sharing, right?
Yeah.
It just spurs more creativity.
Well, and feedback too. Like you could have a shitty restaurant back then and it would take a while for people to figure that out. Right. You had a lot more room to like fix things and let it percolate. Where now if you have a crappy restaurant and you go through 60 days of bad reviews, you're so screwed. Right. They've actually done these studies where like any restaurants with 3.5 stars and below have like a 90% chance of going out of business.
Right. What you just mentioned is one of the biggest lessons I've learned on the show too. Like go to a New York, a Miami, a Los Angeles, go be in those markets, go work in the toughest markets, and then take that standard of excellence and creativity and just that talent pool and then bring that level of execution back to, I would have said, like in your time it was in Arizona, Phoenix, but today it's like a Dayton, Ohio.
I think they were executing well. I don't know if it was that. To me, it was more like creative food, like taking bigger risks with food. Like I remember putting burrata on the menu at Postino early on and people not knowing what that was. And that was in 2010 in Arizona. Like some people did, but not what it is now.
Got it.
You know?
So you're back in Arizona.
Okay, so anyway, I'm at Postino and I meet Craig, my business partner, and I'm going to buy these tables from him because I'm going to open my own restaurant. And he's like, why you want to buy those tables? And I said, well, I'm going to open my own restaurant. And he's like, well, let's talk, you know? So I sit down with his wife and I bring all my like binders of all my different concepts and like we're going through it. And they're like, well, let's partner up together. Around the same time, I'm also figuring out that my $30,000 is not indeed going to get me 2 restaurants, unfortunately. And he's like, look, let's just partner up and do this together. And so, he'd been in the business. He'd had some other restaurants with another guy. And Postino was like, he kind of let me sort of take the reins. I always loved food. I loved R&D, that kind of thing. There wasn't a big food menu. Then it was more of a traditional wine bar with some noshes. And I really treated that like it was like my practice round.
Treat it like you own it. And you
might. Like whether or not we were going to do a deal together or we weren't, like in my mind, I was like, I'm going to like treat this like I do. And there's nothing but good things that can come out of it. We used to be closed on Sunday and I'd come in there and just like mess with the food. And, you know, he and Chris would come by and taste stuff. And I didn't care. Like I tell the young people now, I'm like, I'm not over here trying to be like, oh, did you pay me for that? Like I was trying to learn myself. And I think that I had this like really interesting understanding early on of like, I didn't care about like what people were paying me, which kind of turned out and still a little bit of a problem for me. Cause like I always just saw the big picture of like, what am I trying to do here? And if I had the opportunity to learn from someone who figured it out, learn and test on their dime, like why not do that?
Right.
You know, I'm always perplexed by my team, even that's like, we give you the keys to the castle. In our company, we're full transparency. Like you can learn anything you want. And not a lot of people take me up on that.
Yeah. I mean, there's the path of doing it yourself. Right. And then there's a path of enjoying forces and going further together. And to your point, like you can learn so much, right? By compounding and getting the mentor, being taught, and you don't have to do it alone. Is one of the biggest lessons I've learned. I think we think that we have to. And Craig
is very much like a thoroughbred entrepreneur. I think I like to think of myself as like a little bit of a hybrid, you know, like Andy's a little bit that way, like really, there's a lot of people that start restaurants are like idea people and they can't either execute or they can't scale. Right. And so to find someone who wants to do those things too and a creative, like, I think they're kind of like few and far between. And like, how do you hone those skills, equally?
But would you say you need all those people?
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Or have like, you know, be relatively like good at them. Like I wasn't great at the finance piece. Like math's never been my thing. I was really good at the creative. I was pretty good at the leadership side and I was terrible at the math thing. And I knew I knew I was never going to be a CFO, but I'd have to be like literate and know enough about it. So I planned on like learning.
You need to know the language. You need to understand when it's being spoken to you, but you don't have to be good at doing it.
Yeah. I mean, you said it earlier about how do you make money at this? I sort of knew that part of it because I think when you outside of just like, even if you don't want to stay somewhere, but like working for someone who does make money and you learn those systems, you learn how to manage labor, you know how to write a schedule, you know how to write a prep list, you know how to build a menu that doesn't have 50,000 SKUs. So your menu gets so big, that stuff is pretty valuable.
Right. So it sounds like during this time, you're really trying to get an idea of who you are and where your strengths are. And like, did you know your lane at this point?
I'm like 25 at this time. Like,
frontal lobe starting to round off for ladies around this time.
I'm an old soul. Mine was like pretty rounded. Well, that's not true. It's still getting rounded, but parts of it were rounded. You know, and the thing about Craig that was like so magical about him was that he was never a hoarder of like what was going on or control freak or never had to have like, he's really good at a lot of things, but if you were to tell me like what's his biggest strength, he was really good at bringing people into the fold that cared a lot, that wanted to contribute deeply, and then giving them room to do so.
What did that look like? How did he do it? If he was good at it, like what was his approach? What did he
just wasn't a control freak. Like he was always really interested in like people's ideas, and he provided like a landscape for, you know, and to me, when we did this deal, I was 25. My parents didn't give me money. He was like, look, you can buy in as much equity as you can come up with. And I don't know if he like realized how, and I told him at the time, I said, look, it may not be on this round, but I'm not looking to have like a minority partnership with this. I want to have equal partnership at some point.
Where was where was this restaurant? Your first restaurant, Postino.
It's right down the street.
No, but like in terms of like its evolution as a restaurant, how many was it open for a couple of years? Or
it had been open for 3 years as a wine bar.
3 years as a wine bar. When you came on, where was Craig? He was a sole owner, right?
He and his wife, and then he had a partnership with this guy Bob Lynn, and they had LGO, Chelsea's Kitchen. They had kind of started growing that, and I think that partnership, this is my perception, started falling apart a little bit, and I feel like, you know, he wanted to keep Postino out of the mix and then partnered with me because, you know, he was very misaligned with Bob in terms of the way they were growing that business. And I think that's like, honestly, the story that's more common than it is that you have, like he and I have, which is a 23-year partnership. So it's really interesting when you think about like how it all shook out, because then, you know, he was kind of busy doing that. And I think that was part of like what allowed him to give me this room. And then because he was doing these restaurants in California with Bob, and they were opening this other stuff, and he was like, great, you're kind of handling this, like go for it. And he's very trusting. Like he kind of, once he trusts you, it's like,
is it easy to earn that trust?
He's one of those people that starts with 100 and you chip away. I start with 0 and you add up. So it's just like how the framework in your brain's built. So again, like he starts with like, don't let me down kind of thing.
Like you have a full bucket of trust, and every time you cross me, there's a one item, like one piece out of 100 being removed.
Yes, but you can also put more in if you screw up. Like he's forgiving in that way. Me, like I gotta see you do it. Like I'm not gonna
earn the trust.
Like I'll give you like a little amount. Like there'll be a base layer.
I think I'm more like you too. I say I have trust issues where like I'm very slow to trust people, but if I do trust you, it's like I don't even need to like I trust you.
Yeah, I can have moments where I trust people too much. Once they've done that, like you get the monopoly money at first, you know, the base layer.
Yeah.
And you can do a little better, earn more.
Yeah.
But you know.
Gotcha.
There was a lot of things about him like that. Like I also feel like he really always would push the edge of like what he and I were very complementary in our styles of personality. And so when we partnered to do this, I don't think we realized, I was 25, he was 35. And I don't think we realized like how we sort of won the lottery in the way that we complemented each other.
How did you complement each other?
He's very like big picture entrepreneur, like, yeah, no matter what, guys, we got this relationship based. Like, I kind of need to know how the widget works. Like we're both really creative in different ways, but like I need to have a plan, and like I need to see the plan. I like to know like the finance side of it. I like to scale stuff. He's like a really good relationship. Everyone loves him. He was always a good cop. I was a bad cop. You know, I think someone asked me this other day, is like one of my biggest regrets in our partnership in business was that when I was younger, because you're hot-headed and your frontal lobe isn't developed, is like, I didn't like let us like be like lean into him being him and me being me. And I think he would probably tell you the same thing. Like we looked at our differences as problems versus like benefits. And I think a lot of partnerships, like the very nature of maybe what attracts you in the beginning is what can make the partnership great. But then when things get hard, I mean, this is a marriage. It is absolutely a marriage, but with more shit to argue about in a faster paced environment and more at stake. Right.
Right.
And so like, you know, in hindsight, I think had I realized like, look, let's let Craig be Craig and go do the things he's doing and like really give him room. And then the same thing for me, like, let's let me do this. And then, you know, converge on the things that we needed to converge. I think as things got busier, got more stressful, more pressure, you know, I think we both looked at each other like, why don't you do it my way kind of thing? Yeah. And so that was a valley when we look back and we talk about this. However, the thing that was different for Craig and I was like, we always came back to the table. There was never this moment of like, are we going to break up?
Well, yeah, it's like, is it 10,000 hours or 10,000 renditions, right? You go like ready, fire, aim. Wait, no, ready, aim, fire. Did I get that backwards?
Depends on which path you're taking.
No, yeah, it's ready, fire, aim. That's the one. Ready, fire, then aim. So you shoot and you adjust. You shoot and you adjust. And I think it also takes years of working with somebody to kind of to figure out that dance and to really understand someone's strengths and weaknesses. How are you going to know?
And most people give up before like they'll get really wrapped up in the process. Like people just he and I have very different processes about things. You know, that's like the one thing I sort of sometimes, I don't have very many regrets, like just maybe a couple, but so far, knock on wood. But like I kind of some days wonder like what would have happened had we like leaned into that a little deeper. We ended up getting like business coaches, like there's a nice name for business therapists.
What do you mean by lean into that? Be specific.
Lean into like letting him be him and me be me, and like pushing it a little bit more of like not having expectations of one another. Because I think as partnerships grow and like the tensions grow and the business gets harder, or you're facing like a phase that you don't know and people are uncomfortable, it brings things out in you where you start to look at like, why can't you do it this way? Or why did you do that? Or like,
did you have expectations from him that he wasn't meeting, or was it the other way around?
I think we both did.
What was your expectation of him that he wasn't meeting?
He was like, we had at the time, I think I'm trying to think of the low point. Like, I think we had 5 restaurants. I always tell people like 3 to 7 is probably the hardest time, because you're not big enough at 3 to have any kind of like oversight, but you're not small enough where you can be everywhere. And then going from 3 to 5 is like probably the hardest, because again, you can't really get institutional financing. It's hard to get investors. If you do, they have a lot of equity. And it's just hard to do what you did before, you know. Right. That pushed us pretty hard, and I think he had a path of like, oh, we'll figure it out, you know. And I was like wanting to make systems and streamline things, and like that was the other big disagreement we had, was he wanted to keep opening different concepts, and I was like, we're going to be 6 years old with like 25 different concepts and still changing air filters. And I started to get, based on some mentors that I had, like, you got to grow a concept to sell it so that you can then like retire. Because how many people that are older do you know still running their restaurants? And like, I'm like, man. And I think when we opened Joyride, that was our 5th concept. It was like, they're just hard. You know, you don't have the widgets right. You don't have the recipes right. You don't have the thing right. And it's hard to keep ideating new concepts all the time.
Let me make, you're dropping a lot, and you're like a rapid fire. It's fun. It's hard to keep up with you. So I want to make sure I'm fully understanding. So it seems like you were trying to really execute and put all the energy into making one thing just run smooth. And he's cruising at 40,000 feet. What's next? Big picture. Yeah. Opportunity. You're like, I curse a lot. Slow the fuck down. Like,
well, that was the argument that we'd have. Like, we would literally open a restaurant and he'd already be like, hey, can you come tomorrow and look at this new site? And I'd be like, dude, can we like get this stabilized first?
Like, don't distract me from this thing that I'm trying to
Well, and like, I would get mad because I'm like, man, you know, like, I'm sort of left trying to run this, and you're like already off in this other land, like looking at a new site, because he was a deal junkie. He still is. And like, he will tell you, and now we're older, we've done this long enough. And that's what I mean is like, in hindsight, had I been like, cool, send it to me, I'll go look at it, and I'm going to figure out how to run this at the same time. I spent a ton of energy like getting cracked about that. And ultimately, like, we always landed in the right spot, you know? And like, I guess you could argue, like, would we have landed in the right spot had we not had this like friction? I think the good thing was both of us felt fine telling each other like, slow the fuck down, or like, hey, you're holding us back. And that tension, you know, when we reminisce on our lives together, like, you're making me wish he was here. I think that tension like always took us to the right spot.
Right.
So it's also not just like, it was like leaning into being okay with the tension.
So if I was talking to him, it sounds like what he would, if I asked him the same questions, what was it that was, I can't remember what I asked you exactly, but like, what was it that what were your expectations that he was falling short of, or something?
He'd be like
that?
she was like wanting to go way slower than I thought we needed to, like gas and brakes, and then like wanting to make sure everything was perfect before we took the shot.
Yeah.
Like, we actually talk about this a lot.
Paralysis by analysis or something like that. Like overthinking it and not just taking the leap.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the reason that you guys are so opposite and that you probably force each other out of each other's comfort zones is why you're so successful. Yeah. Because if you were both like Craig or both like you know, like you'd grow way too fast and you would spin out of control. But like when finding somebody who's your polar opposite is so important, because it's like that extreme opposite that will give you the perspective that's usually right in the middle.
Huge. That's why I'm saying is like the biggest regret is not realizing that earlier on, so like respecting the pole.
Wait, help me fully understand.
Because it's like painful. Like, you're like arguing or about stupid shit that doesn't matter, versus just being like, you know, hey, here's my view, and like, is there somewhere in the middle that we could land? Because and I was like, you know, look, you're taking things personally. You're running out of money. You're trying to manage your family. Both of us had kids that were little. Like, you're trying to manage a relationship. You're just pedal to the metal. And so you're just running on like, you know, burning the candle at both ends. And then that adds to the stress in the conversation. And so I'm redheaded too. So I know, you know, my friend, I just wish we would have looked at that as a benefit, not a challenge. And it was a mindset thing. Like, I'm very much about mindset now. Is like, if back then I looked at this as like an annoyance, a challenge, he sees it differently than me. Now I look at it exactly like you articulated it, which was why we were successful.
Right. Hindsight's always 20/20. When you're in it, you're in it. It's like why you can't see the island of Manhattan when you're on it. But when you go up to 30,000 feet and you're flying over, like, there's Manhattan.
Yeah.
It's like you have to.
But that's why I try to share a lot with people in partnerships because, we've had a really lovely partnership. And like my son was saying to me yesterday, we were over in San Diego opening a restaurant and we were at Craig's house and he's like, Mama, I want to be like Mr. Demarco. I'm like, dude, he's a great guy. Like you should aspire to be like him. And I kind of got teary-eyed. He's like, why are you crying? I'm like, because he's just my call. He's like my first call. And he's 10 years old. And I'm like explaining to him, he's like, what does it mean your first call? And I said, when something happens, like when my sister died or a big life thing happens, it's like you pick up the phone and you don't even realize you're dialing the number.
Yeah.
And so to me, being able to build this business is awesome. Like we love the business, but to have this partnership stand the test of time and like have rolled through all of these highs and lows and then always having come back to the table and then fundamentally having this like deep friendship now is like probably one of the things I value and am the most proud of.
Yeah. I'll be honest. So I give myself 1 hour max to research because I don't like to know too much because I feel like if I know too much, I steer the conversation and I'm really here to listen and to understand from your perspective, your story. I feel like the conversation is always better. When I'm listening to you talk, it almost sounds like there's a regret, like a resentment. But he's still around.
Oh my God, we talk to him every day. That's what I'm saying. I'm just giving you like, you want to go deep. So I'm telling you like why I talk about this is because I think it's like, I watch people's partnerships fall apart more than stay together.
Yeah.
And it's worth fighting for.
Right.
And it's worth just knowing if there's the one thing that you agree on is like, we're always coming back to the table. You'll figure it out.
Do you know we've been doing this for 40 minutes already?
I can't believe it.
Doesn't it go by so fast?
It does. I was like, Jesus, I need another Ritalin.
I thought I got to take a break to thank our sponsors. It's been 20 minutes. We'll be right back to unpackage this more.
We have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that every second and fourth Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, Restaurant Systems Pro CEO Fred Langley is going live to teach you everything you need to know to run a profitable restaurant from soup to nuts. All you got to do is click the link below.
We're back. So real quick, get big picture for me. Like where are you today? What does your business look like today?
So we have about to open our 32nd restaurant. We have 1,900 employees. We're in 5 states. We'll be in 7 by this time next year, in 10 cities. It's a pinch me moment, man. I mean, I'm like, I thought if I had one restaurant, my mama could ask me what I was into my life, like that was a goal. It was high on the list. We hit 100 million in sales last year, which was a big milestone because a lot of people tell me like, that's a huge milestone for a restaurant company. And, no offense, but if you hit it, you probably won't be running it. And I took that again as a personal challenge that I wanted to hit that. And so we did. So that was a big one for me. I don't know why too. That was like when we did the private equity deal, I was like, oh my God, private equity deal.
Is that how you know Andy?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I'll tell you that story because it's a good one. Kind of. That's how I know Andy. But, that was like cool, but it was cool in the sense that we weren't having to use our own money and I wasn't like maxing out credit cards and like not paying estimated taxes. And so that stress was gone and we were going to bring in a CFO and we were going to hire some people and that felt really good. But in terms of an accomplishment, it wasn't for me personally, like the thing. Like I love our partners. I love Brentwood, but hitting 100 million in sales and being in all these markets and people loving our concept and our brand and it like running relatively smoothly and still running it as a founder, because a lot of founders like blow up. And that became this thing for me that was like the studying and the focus for development that I was really about, because I wanted to be a founder that made it like Sarah Blakely from like making girdles in her garage to like $1 billion company and still running it.
So your fear was blowing up. Like what, I'm going to get
me
so
personally,
big where I can't handle it.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, it's a little bit like sports, I think. Like, I think you're like, I want to go out before they make me go out.
So your drive wasn't to get as big as possible, but it was to survive getting as big as possible.
No, it was to thrive, like, and still enjoy it and wake up like, 90% of the time and be like, I want to go to work today.
So,
like, I've never been about like, oh, how am I going to make money? Like, I already have, when we did the deal the first time, even like when we had a few restaurants, I already had way more money than I ever thought I'd have. And so it wasn't about that anymore. It was like about like,
it comes from a place of fear. I feel like you like,
no,
if you don't make
it's like wanting to like, just to do great stuff every day and like, what you do.
Money, chasing the money typically comes from a place of fear that if I'm not going after the money, I won't have what I need to do the things I need to do to like, so I'm kind of resonating with what you're saying right now, because, one thing that I recently am guilty of is focusing on how am I going to get the money to do the things I want to do, instead of focusing on what do I want to do that feels right to me, that feels like the natural thing, like trusting your gut. Specifically, I've been getting a lot of encouragement to like be a coach. And I'm like, I don't want to be a coach. Like I've noticed, like when I started this, I didn't say I want to do this to one day become a coach. I did this to learn and to help other people learn. Mm-hmm. And I think somewhere along the line, you get this pressure to like monetize things or to make it about the money, and it pulls you off course. And then whatever it was that made you special, whatever your unique ability was, whatever made you fall in love with the thing in the first place, falls to the backside because you're like, I have these responsibilities. Does that sound right? No? Do you not resonate?
It's not that I don't. I think it was, for me, it's just different. Like I literally think when I have a really bad day or things get scary or whatever, I go to worst case scenario and like, I'll just have to go back to bartending. Right. And like, I can live with that. Actually, it'd probably be really fun. I probably have like a great life, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about half the shit that I worry about today. I'd be like, oh, I'm like,
sure you're a great
bartender. Then I really was actually, I'm not going to lie. Like I start thinking about like kind of daydreaming about like, oh, like bartending would actually be like really fun, you know? And so I don't fear that in that way. And I think that's unique. Like, look, do I drive a nice car, a nice house, go on nice trips? Sure. But I don't have this feeling of like, if I quit this job right now today, I'd find some other way to make money.
Right. So,
I just fundamentally have that like core belief in my system that I would like, Craig jokes and says he could drop me off butt naked downtown and I'd make a paper dress and get a job and like be fine.
So I guess what was most important to you, what you kept your focus on was not losing sight of what you love in the first place.
I knew if I woke up every day and like wanted to pick up the bat and swing and like kick ass and like I was excited about my day, all the other stuff would fall in place.
Yeah.
You know?
What is it about your mindset that lets you kind of stay like that? Like what is the narrative you tell yourself when you see yourself maybe being pulled from what to your core you know is true?
I'm an emotional person for sure. Like I definitely take things pretty hard. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like, I don't know. I mean, again, like I think that I feel really lucky to do this job. I had this moment, I was sitting in my therapist's office and she's like, I can't remember what I told her, but she's like, Lauren, do you know that like probably 5 to 10% of people really love what they do? Like really love it. And I think in like most of the ways that's the best thing ever. But in some ways it's harder because all this shit, like, you know, work-life balance is not made for me or people like me who love what they do. In fact, we have the opposite problem. Right. You know, it's like, I don't need to feel like I need work-life balance because I have like really good, I'm happy at work. You know, I'm happy doing this job. And like, there's a million different aspects, like what I could tell you why I do it. Like, you know, I like giving my team really big checks. And when we did the deal the first time, I remember we brought Amy, who's still with me. She's out there right now. Like we get done, we do the private equity deal. And like 2 days later, when I hired Amy and like a week after I hired her, I said, hey, we're going to run a private equity process as an investment. Cause we'd never taken institutional investors. We had 11 restaurants. Like we tied shoestrings together, like no debt, no real partners except in the joyrides. It was pretty interesting that we were able to pull that off. Anyway, so we get to the end of the deal and she's like, oh my God, private equity deal. Like we're gonna, okay. And I'm like, Amy, you'll figure it out. We'll do it. No CFO doing that. It's like insane when you think about it, right? We get to the end of the deal. We do it. We bring her in the office and she sits down in the conference room and Craig and I are in there and I have an envelope, you know, and she's like, are you firing me? She starts crying. And I'm like, no, Amy, we're not firing her. We hand her like this, you know, $50,000 transaction bonus check. Right. And she just is like blown away. And I thought, my God, that like it was cool for us to make money, but that was like super cool. Yeah. And that was the moment like where I'm like, I want to do that more.
It feels great. It's like serving somebody a piece of pizza or food that came from your restaurant and like them just being, this is so good. The same thing happens when you create opportunity for people.
Well, and she just to see people, like she killed herself, like getting this done for us, like doing things I didn't even know what quality of earnings was, like all this stuff, like she was figuring out on the fly. She was like calling her friends from college to find out, like to honor and see people that contribute and do this. But this is not an easy business, as you know, and like to be able to do, that's not the end all be all, like I mean, but like it's a big part of it, you know, to honor people's contributions along the way.
Oh, for sure. And I think people forget that you need the people to do it. And unless you're creating opportunity and sharing in the successes, like you're going to lose the people that help you get there. They're going to go find it someplace else. They're going to go help make somebody else get rich and share in the benefits of that.
Yeah.
You know? So 32 locations, 7 more in the next year. You have 5 concepts today, correct? Mm-hmm. So it's Postino, you have Windsor Churn, you have Federal Pizza, you have Joyride. Am I missing one?
No, that's right.
Okay. So how many total locations of each of those concepts?
So Joyride, we have 2. The others, we only have 1. And we call that section of the business the indies, like the independent concepts.
So Windsor Churn 1, Federal Pizza 1, Joyride 2, and then that means you have over 30, soon to be over 30 Postinos.
Yes.
Got it.
And they're actually all down on the block, like one block straight down from here. Every one of those concepts is on. There's a Postino, a Joyride, a Churn, a Windsor, and a Federal Pizza, like literally on one block.
Okay. Do you have a Joyride in Gilbert?
Yep.
So that's the second Joyride.
Yep.
Got it. My community manager lives right down the street from that location.
Oh, nice.
I would love to go into that one.
Well, let me know.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. So in terms of like scale, so did you guys just go hard into Postino from the beginning, and when did the other concepts start to come?
We had the other so we had 11 restaurants.
Take me chronologically.
Okay, so we did Postino Central. Well, we did Postino Central. We co-founded Upward Projects, which is our hospitality company and parent company. And then we did the Windsor. We did Postino East. We did Federal Pizza. We did Postino in Denver. That was our first out-of-state one. And now I'm going to get blurry on like how it all transcribes out. But basically, like, then we went to Houston, another out-of-state one. We just kind of, and then we went to Annex on a college university. We didn't really realize at the time, but we were kind of like testing this concept in a lot of different environments. It was like in the core tastemaker, like Postino Central. Arcadia was in this like wealthy neighborhood. Annex was on a college university. Gilbert was in the suburbs. Like, so, you know, as I started to learn, again, it was like the sliding doors thing. David Berzon from the CEO of Snooze, and then Rick Federico, and many people would talk about Alice Elliott all the time.
I've talked to David. He's somebody that when I go to Denver, we're going to try again this show.
Yeah, he's great.
On the show.
He's got a really cool story.
Nice.
He was like an original, you know, Paradise Bakery.
Well, I mean, no.
It was like the first one was in Aspen, and they grew, and ultimately Panera bought. It was a concept very similar to Panera, but Paradise Bakery was around before Panera. And then David used to scoop cookies out of there. He was a ski bum that scooped cookies. He's a great story.
I've heard stories of him sleeping on like bags of flour in the early days. So
he's a great story.
I'm happy his name came up.
Yeah, he's a good friend of ours.
Beautiful.
Where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought.
So you were just talking about like I don't know. I forget. You were talking about David and other people.
Introducing me to Alice Elliott.
Yes.
And that changed my life because I finally convinced them to introduce me to her. If you don't know her, she's a titan of our industry. She recruits a lot of C-suite people for really big restaurants, but she has a really deep passion for budding entrepreneurs. She actually, the brothers that started Snooze, she sort of put that whole deal together and brought David to the table to run it because they didn't want to run it anymore after they had 5 units, and then brought the private equity. She knows everyone in the business.
Okay.
So I remember like the day I was going to call her, and she's going to call me. I was standing in this parking lot, and I thought, I'm going to make this chick think I'm so badass and like blow her mind. No, dude, I was like crying after 30 seconds. Like, she's like, you have no money, you have no capital. Your company's going to blow up. Don't worry though. I'm going to help you. And
you
she
referenced her when we first talked on the phone.
Yeah, she changed my life. And she did. She made calls because she called basically the investment bankers and got them to come out and look. They wouldn't even take my phone call. We were way too small.
When was this? Take us to this point. I think this is
2000, like late 2015 or
late 2015, 9 years ago. Where were you 9 years ago? Paint the picture of your business.
We had 10 restaurants, about to open the one in Houston. And then she had introduced me to Damon. I went to ICR. That's where I went.
Of those 10 restaurants, how many different concepts were there?
Still the 5. We had all those open already.
Right.
So it was 5 Postinos. It was 5 Postinos, about to open the 6th in Houston. And then 4 of the other concepts.
All right.
Yeah.
So take me to. Did you feel pain at this time? Did you think
this was like the time I told you earlier about with Craig and I? That was probably the low point. Like we were really, we were very like disconnected about like how this was going to go. Like he wanted to open new concepts. I wanted to grow Postino. He was like just wanted to have like his kids were at the age where they want to be at sports, and I was like wanting to go all in on the business, and so that drove a lot of it. And then also I think we started to realize we had a tiger by the tail. Like we didn't know that what we were doing with Postino was so successful.
Yeah, you're dropping a ton on me, and I'm so tempted to go in so many different ways, but I want to kind of I feel like there's things that we're kind of like, how do you share the big picture, right? And I kind of want to go back now and like I really want to like dissect like what were the biggest hurdles for you, because you said from like 0 to the 3 word challenge, like 5 to something
3
else
to 5, and then 5 to 11 was hard, but we had like Eric Henderson, Tori DeMarce, like we had some really key people that had been with us from the beginning, and Brent Karlochek, who's still here.
Let's go to 3 to 3. You said 5 to 11.
Yeah,
just before this point, because I feel like there's lessons from 5 to 11, and I think a lot of people. So I think I know the answers to like 3 to 5, right? But just real quick, in case there's something I'm missing that's unique to your story, biggest challenge 3 to 5. for you.
You have no infrastructure and you have to be in multiple places at one time.
Yeah, we mentioned that. Systems, processes, procedures, protocol, culture, community writing, training, constant training, like really focusing on doing everything in your business better instead of scaling. Do what you're already doing better until you don't need to be there
and make it consistent. What you don't ever want to hear is like, oh, I like that Postino, but not this one.
Right.
You know,
I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that because I feel like I've learned a lot of that, but the 5 to 11 is an interesting area where what was the challenge there?
Real estate. So like you want to make sure you can't miss on those. You get one of those, a dog in the bunch of the first 10 and you're kind of screwed because that'll drag down your numbers. Like those, any institutional investor, private equity, a VC, even like outside investors.
So when you say real estate, finding a location?
Yeah, because you pick the wrong site and then like you go do a deal with somebody, like here's where they get like, I hear a lot of stories and what we never did. You'll have enough locations where landlords would be like, oh, I like that place. Hey, we'll give you a great deal. We'll build this for you for free if you come here and do this. Well, guess what? I'm just gonna be straight with you. Any deal where a landlord's going to fully build out your space with you not putting any money in or give you free rent for a very long extended period of time is not a good deal. Full stop. Like it is not. I've never seen somebody do a deal like that. I mean, I'm sure there's like 1 or 2 outliers. That's a good real estate location. They almost always have to pay for a person to come in there. So you miss on a real estate or you just make a mistake and you're like, look, we didn't realize this was one street off. Like our site in Lohi was a risk in hindsight. Like, we didn't know what we knew now. Would we have done that? Probably not, because it was in the middle of a neighborhood. There was no parking. There was no foot traffic. It was very destinational, and it took 2 or 3 years to ramp.
Right.
It could have been a disaster. And had we screwed that up, you're messing up your portability, which is hands down the most important factor if you're going to look to get institutional investment at 10 units plus, which is really where you need to be depending on the sales volumes before you're going to get any of that interest whatsoever. If you screw up the portability, the first out of market store, you're done.
What does portability mean?
It shows that your concept can work outside your home market.
Got it.
Like the investors will be like, that's great. You live in the market. Everyone knows you. They know that brand, but does it work when you're not there? And does it work when no one knows the brand?
It has the ability to ship.
To travel, yep.
To go someplace.
So if you go out of state and you screw that up and you're not mentally in a place where like that was our 6th store, was the one in Denver. And we were very lucky to hire this woman named Jen Beery. And I was obsessed with making sure that she was the right person. And I literally went to the store. She was working in On the Border. And I was like, oh my God, On the Border. Like, oh, this is garbage. Like, so I drive all the way out there to Lakewood and I sit down at the bar and I'm like talking to the bartender and I'm like, why are you working here? He's like, this fucking place is a dump. Like, he's like, I love the GM, her. And I'm like looking in the dumpster, like perfectly clean dumpster. Like, you got to nail that site. You have to. And you have to have this space and time in your personal life to be able to go there a bunch. We picked Denver because there's like 40 direct flights there a day. It's a 1-hour time change. Like if something went down, I could get there quickly.
Right.
And so that went well for us, but we also had time to let it ramp too. And then like the 6th, 7th, 8th were stuff around here. And then we did the last one in Houston, but by that point,
when you say stuff around here, more Postinos?
Yeah.
Got it. And
then we had opened another Postino that we had actually opened post closing of the private equity deal, but we had that deal and we spent a ton of time like asking everybody about like, is this the right real estate? And this is like the number one thing. If I leave your listeners with nothing else, you are completely screwing yourself if you don't build an awesome cadre of mentors to call and say, hey, Sam Fox, what do you think about this real estate site? Because you've been all over the country like forever looking at this stuff. What do you think about this for a Postino? Oh, hey, Andy Forsheimer, what do you think about this? Who also has been traveling thousands of miles, like nail the real estate.
This is literally what I'm trying to create right now. The aha moment, when I was telling you before I was getting encouraged to be a coach, I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to help my listeners, good people, connect with this generation's leaders through story, like the actual podcast. But like also the other big reason why I'm living in this camper is because I want to develop relationships with people. So
I think you should think about how to do it differently. It's like Uber, like find out what's broken about the mentor thing and then fix that. And I'll give you my opinion is like no one has time to mentor people.
Yeah. So how do you crowdsource?
So then they're like, oh, I'm going to coach. And then like these people coach and it's like, you have a limited amount of stuff. I don't know. Here's my idea for you.
I don't think you can go. Yeah.
I think it's like you start this, whatever, you're a person that you want to put in a question on there and like you get people to go on and they just ask a question like, hey, I have this site. Here's my concept. What do you think about it? And like build this. There's nowhere to go to just ask questions. Like, what are you going to do? Go to Reddit? And then make it membership based and then do something where you have people like, hey, LB, will you give people, like with my team, I do 2 times a month. I do office hours. So I just get on the thing and like anybody can log on, ask me anything they want. if they don't have time, believe me, I can fill an hour, clearly.
You literally just described the conversation we've been having the 2 weeks. So you're making me feel like I feel, and I just said this morning, I've never felt so good about the direction we're going.
Do that. Figure out what's broken about it. You know, my buddy started Tuft & Needle, and he was in the Silicon Valley during that time. And I asked him, I was like, what was it like there then? He's like, you know, you ever go to Walmart and you see that like bin of all those DVDs that are $5 that no one wants to watch? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's like that. But all those ideas have one thing in common. And you know what that thing is? I said, what? He said, they didn't solve a problem. People approach mentorship now like they did in the 90s when like you were like, oh, hey, Joe, can you meet me for lunch? Guess what? No one's going to do that. Right. I read books about how to say no to people. So
it's a skill. Like,
will I do this? Yes, because it's scalable and like it's easy to do it. Can you pop in and out of it? Like, I think I'd figure out like what's broken about the world of mentors and solve that.
I think the thing that I get excited about is the why. It's like, if we can fix the restaurant industry, I don't think we fully wrapped our minds around how powerful the restaurant industry is. And if we can make an army of, if we're going to change the industry, we're going to do it by changing one person at a time.
See, I don't think the restaurant industry is broken. I think we have a marketing problem.
I think that what's broken about the industry is that it's hard to create opportunity on small scale for people. In order to create opportunity in the restaurant industry, you need to scale to big things, like at least 20 locations. Like you have to grow to make opportunity for other people. I think that there's a sweet spot between 500 locations and 5 locations where we can have regional scale. And what I'm trying to do is bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots to find a place in the middle where you can at least provide security for your people, health benefits, opportunity, growth, a feeling of belonging and feeling like you're growing as an employee. There's so many ceilings in the restaurant industry. I think that's part of the issue. Do you disagree with that?
A little bit. Sorry.
No, please help me.
I don't think it's like, you know, it's not this one size fits all thing. Like, I think there's plenty of spaces that, you know, when people tell me like, oh, I can't do it. I'm like, yes, you can. I did it. I maxed out my credit cards. It depends on the lifestyle that you want to have. Like, I literally went to Costco and bought cases of ramen noodles and Red Bull for a decade. And I was fine doing that because I knew what I was going to do.
Okay.
And now I don't do that.
Why I think it's broken is not everybody thinks like you.
It's not necessarily that. It's not they're willing to live like that.
Well, yeah. So what I'm trying to do, and here's my mission, is that if I can provide enough examples of you, here's another way I explain it. A restaurant owner's job is to create the picture, or to share the picture of perfection of what the job done right looks like, and to give their team the tools and resources to build them up to do the job, right? You're building people. You're not in the business of selling food as much as you're in the business of building people,
100%.
And training people. So where does the restaurant owner go to get that? If your job is to build up people below you, if we're gonna make the industry better, I think that there needs to be. You can
do that with one restaurant. Like, why do you have to have scale?
I think that
in fact, in some ways it's easier.
I think in order to, I think you need to have layers of people, right? And if you have say you have 2 GMs, right? And then you have the opportunity to have 3 or 4 GMs below them. And if you don't create another location to move these GMs over here to run their own stores, the people below them are going to go somewhere else.
But why is that wrong?
I think that by creating opportunity for other people and scaling to provide vertical growth for your employees
in the same company.
So like that's one of the biggest things I've learned, that if you're not growing, then you're gonna lose the people on deck.
But that's okay. There's nothing that makes me happier than when somebody decides leaves my company to go open their own business, open their own restaurant, or gets a job. Like, we've lost people. I lost this amazing HR manager because we didn't have an HR director role for her, and that was not in the cards for her in the next probably year or two. And she left to go be an HR director at a country club. And like, am I bummed to lose Rosanna? 100%, 150%. However, like, I'm also like, you know, she learned a lot here and like can take that to another place.
Let me turn the table on you. Why didn't you stop at 1?
Because we have shiny object syndrome, and it's about creativity.
But
and I'll tell you, like,
that's human nature. Everybody has shiny object syndrome.
But yes and no. Like, I think there's a lot of people I know too. Like, I also think about when I'm retiring, I used to joke and be like, I'm going to have this thing. I'm going to design this exactly how, if I had one restaurant, I'll tell you what it would look like. It'd be open 5 days a week. It would be open like the hours I wanted it to be. It would be on my terms. I'd have like people that worked for me that had ownership in it, like a percentage that I'd give them sweat equity in it. They would participate. The model would be totally different. and I would just do that. And I think like, look, are we perfect? No. And I'm not sitting here trying to argue with you and say it's perfect, because it's definitely not. And there's really good players and there's really bad players. In my mind, that they've all kind of gotten lumped together of like people and restaurant owners are pieces of shit that don't pay people or whatever it is. I'm not saying you're saying broken? That. No, I think there's restaurant groups and restaurants that are broken, and I think there's some like incredible ones too. Yeah. What I love about it, and where this is my counterpoint to yours, is that the restaurant business doesn't care if you went to school, if you went to college. It doesn't care how long you've been doing it. The restaurant business cares about, can you perform? And you could be, I'll give you an example. Like I had this gal I hired as a server assistant in Federal Pizza, and she was a director of operations in my company, and went from being a server assistant in the span of 6 years to being like the fourth in command in our operations team.
So if sorry, do you want
and
to
making $250,000 a year, probably plus with equity package?
So if the restaurant industry cares about, can you perform, where do you go to learn how to perform? Where do you go to see what performance done right looks like?
Different restaurants. I actually would argue too, like if you stay in one for too long, then you need to go see the way someone else does it.
So I guess what I'm trying to do, to your point, I agree with you. And I think what I'm trying to do is to give perspective without leaving a restaurant, to see how other restaurants perform, to inspire, to see there's other ways to do this. There isn't just the 1905 business model where I make 10% and I'm doing good. There's ways to create passive income and experiences that you can charge extra for, and to blow the roof off the possibilities and limitations, to think outside the box, to get inspiration from other industries, and to like break the mold. And I think that by sharing these perspectives, we can really lift up the restaurant industry. And the restaurant industry, I think, has transformative power.
I do too. But I mean, it can also be like, if you're the kind of person that just wants one unit, that's okay too.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
No, not. But I think that it's being harder and harder and harder for single unit operators to survive, because they have to compete with the bigger companies that have the ability to provide security.
Like with health insurance. Yes. And like.
So that's kind of how I like. That's how I think it's broken, is like it's getting to the point where it's not possible to it's not even a choice to have.
But this is like my brain, like maybe it's the way I've trained it so well, is like I think too, but I always look at like the smaller units as like the things that we were able to do were different and better in a different way. Like they would get, hypothetically, if you're working for a smaller industry, you're going to get a lot more contact with the owner or the operator or the entrepreneur, where you wouldn't in a bigger company.
Right.
Like that's probably one of the biggest things that bums me out, is I don't get to be with my teams in the field as much. The second piece is like, back then we had a lot more flexibility in what we would offer. We were able to, like, if they had a problem, I'd go like write a check for their thing. I can't do that now because it's going to open up like a big HR claim for me.
I'm trying to close the gap between the behemoths of the industry and the mom and pop. So you have mom and pop culture and values in a medium-sized organization, and you have more medium-sized organizations sharing the market.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think it's like closing the gap and flattening the hierarchy.
Well, some people, I would tell you, like the people I know that work for big companies, they want the security, they want the health benefits, they want the 401k, and they're okay with dealing with like I would call like the corporate sort of like rules and regulations and trade off for that. And then the smaller ones, like they're like, I don't really care about those things. I'd rather have a lot more flexibility. I don't want a lot of rules. I don't want if I'm a server, I don't want to be told what to say at a table. Like I want to know I work for this person, and like it's kind of like different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. There's definitely no one way to skin a cat, as the expression goes. That's so gruesome. I don't know why that's even an expression.
I think you need all of it in my mind. I'm a conscious capitalism.
Well, there's
person.
No right answer. And that's the other thing I've learned. I love that. So sorry, continue that train of thought.
I just think that there's room for everybody. There's room for mom and pops. There's room for mid. I've been like, there's been circumstances where I've been like put in this box of like, oh, you guys are too big now, and like kind of like ostracized for that. Like, I'm like, wait, wasn't this the goal? Like we're like the poster child for this wonderful entrepreneurial story. And now we're like, oh, we're too big to like, you guys are assholes now.
I mean, I agree with that. I worry that it is getting harder and harder and harder to be a single unit operator because of how competitive the market's getting, and how much the employee expects from the owner, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that the average common worker is more educated than ever before, and they need a certain level of security than ever before. And it's hard for a single unit operator to provide that level of security to get really, truly amazing people to work for you.
Yeah.
You know, so how do we bridge, like, how do we create
honestly,
a world of more owners?
The problem too, and not a lot of people talk about this, but I'll take the risk and tell you, is that like a lot of things get voted into action that then we have to execute on our level. And for whatever reason, we get chosen as like, oh, you guys need to do whatever the thing is, right?
So like minimum wage increases, things like
whatever.
that.
Yes. And so then people are shocked that all the prices go up. Well, we have investors. We're not just going to be like, okay, our investors are okay making less money, or we're going to just make less money. So then, look at California with the FAST Act.
Right.
Most restaurant owners I know out there put a 10% price increase when that went into effect.
Wow.
And people are like, oh, everything's so expensive. I'm like, what do you think was going to happen?
But at the same time, I think that's kind of falls on the responsibility of the industry and the shoulders of owners and operators, is to educate the consumer as to why food should cost. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's broken about the restaurant industry, that the food system that it's a part of is broken.
But then how come you don't say that about retail? And like also the clothing industry is probably the biggest polluter. I would say
that about that.
The biggest polluter in the world is the clothing industry.
I would say that.
These retail people make, they make very low wages, and there's no FAST Act for them.
But I think that I think because food is so critical to the consumer's well-being, that it has the power to open the consumer's eyes. And it starts with food, because people are fucking selfish. Pardon my language. They don't do anything until they know what's in it for me. And the cool thing is when you start to realize, hey, when you, source heritage grains and animals, and you decentralize the food system, and you purchase from local, it tastes better, which is a benefit to the consumer. But here's a really cool thing. You're less likely to get cancer.
Yeah.
Extra
benefit.
That's a benefit. So you mean if I choose to spend less money on Gucci, and I put that towards supporting local farms, I'm healthier. I have a less chance of getting cancer. The world I live in is healthier, which also means, less microplastics in my diet. The only way you're going to get the consumer to do something or make change is scaring the fuck out of them.
Yeah.
I believe. And if you can open the consumer's eyes at something that's literally life, we're feeding people with life. We're killing something, repurposing it to keep something else alive.
But don't you think they know that? And like, why doesn't everybody buy organic food then?
Because I think, look at the progress we're making, right? Where were we 20 years ago? Where are we today? I think that there's a change happening. I just don't think it happens overnight. I think that we're like a frog in water, but instead of turning the water up, we're turning it down.
Yeah. I just think that there has to be like the whole thing considered of the ripple effects that happen with this, because like if the FAST Act, just using that as like top of mind going on right now, was meant to pay people a fair wage. Well, now all the prices for all the stuff that we all have to buy is more expensive. So it's not helping the problem. And in fact, it's actually making it harder, because this affects only people with big companies. Well, now that they can go work there, then it's going to, to your point earlier, it's going to raise the wage for even like the mom and pop shops, because
who are the people spending the money on the organics and the grain heritage and all this luxury stuff?
I'm talking about just like restaurant food. It's fast food everywhere. And most of the fast food companies raise the prices. Like if you follow the street, they raise all the prices the first, because they were the ones that had to pay the wage right out of the gate. Like there's a bit of a delay for everyone else in full service, because like they're just responding to like employees leaving a restaurant to go work in a fast food restaurant. Do you know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
I don't have the answer, by the way.
I don't have the answer, but how do we come to an answer? I think it's doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Talking. And I think that the restaurant industry, another reason how it has been broken, is that we've been so busy working 80-hour weeks with our heads down and making a lot of fear-based decisions that we don't have time to get out of our four walls and to have conversations and to open our perspective up and say, like I didn't think of it that way. Conscious, making people more conscious, having conversations.
But also not being afraid of capitalism either. I mean, that's the thing. Like that's become this buzzword that's like,
I'm a capitalist. Let's make that clear.
But I mean, it just doesn't work. It's like you can see countries where they take this away and they're like, it's really like a head scratcher to me. Like there's examples of this in play, like communist behavior that like just don't work.
I don't think there's an issue with capitalism. I think people confuse consumerism with capitalism. I think there's an issue with consumerism.
You know what's crazy? I heard this like stat the other day that was like about people's like clothing, that they used to have like 3 pairs of jeans, and the average American has like 14 pairs of jeans.
Yeah. I'll wear jeans until I blow out the crotch. That's the goal. I mean, I live in a camper. I can make it happen. So anyway, I feel like I'm really loving this conversation with you, and we keep on trying to get to this we're both big picture thinkers, I think.
Yeah. You want to keep going to the story.
I think
I'm trying to think. So the real estate is a big one for the growing 5 to 11.
Yes.
The people piece, I think, where I experienced this, we underhired for, like, I had this thing like, oh my God, that person's going to cost me like whatever money. I'll give you an example. We were going to hire a real estate person, and everybody I knew, mentors, were like, look, this person's going to cost you at least $200,000 a year. And I'm like, I can't do that, and it's like framework, right? Like then someone told me, well, Lauren, think about this. If you get one more real estate deal done, or you open 6 months faster or they save you that much money, which they should, and build out because they have that expertise, you've now paid for that salary. So it's like quantifying when you're growing, it's quantifying. Like I always think about every person I bring through that door and my team. Do they produce sales? Do they save me money, or do they open restaurants faster? What's their benefit? What are they bringing to the table? Because then you can think about those salaries in a different way of like not just money out the door.
Right. You're figuring out how does this person pay for themselves?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or frees you up to do things that you can then do other bigger, more impactful things.
Do they do this
business.
better than me? Can I shed this responsibility?
And that's hard because I think at that point too, you have this like control freak moment from 5 to 11 of like, oh, I gotta touch everything. I gotta sign off on everything. And for me, it was like marketing, brand, design, like a lot of that stuff. Like I was literally still installing art walls in restaurants. I'd like fly to the market for the weekend, and like the one in Montrose, I did that whole, it's very spiritual for me too. Like, but and I think there's a fine line between like touching everything and making sure what's happening, and then also letting other people contribute,
What happens when you let other people contribute?
They don't do it the same way you would, but then sometimes they do it better.
Right.
And then they learn, and you give them these opportunities, and they care. Like the level that our team cares is just brings me to tears.
Yeah. That's what I would have added, is that when you have somebody that has it and they get a sense to own it, that sense of ownership, and I can be seen for this thing that I do, and I bring value to the team. And I think we all need to be seen. And when we have the opportunity to be seen because of what we bring to the table, that creates that sense of ownership and loyalty. And like you have the sense of growth. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, do you love like physiological security? Do I belong? Do you see me and value me? Am I growing? Am I finding my purpose within this organization that makes me feel like I have a reason? And you can do that by shedding and giving responsibility.
And people will go through walls for you, and we feel that and see that every day. I think also the piece too is like having your army of people. Like, and for me, I have like this mental FBI board of who's the person I call for what. And I could go down a quick list of for you, like again, building these folks who like, Andy, when I met him at ICR, it's pretty easy for me to figure out what these people are really good at. And then if there's a thing I'm facing that I can call, and then I know that by the time you have 5 to 10 units, like you're pretty successful, and people are probably telling you all the time how great you are and how much I love your restaurants. You have to actively pay somebody to tell you the truth, or actively seek out feedback from people like Andy, who are going to tell you that your baby's ugly on the reg. Like, what are you doing?
Right. And this kind of is a perfect segue into what you were mentioning with Alice Elliott. That was her name, correct? Mm-hmm. So we kind of identified the challenge from 5 to 11. And then you went to Alice when you were right around that 11 to 15 mark, I think you said, in that ballpark. Yeah.
The capital piece too, just sorry to interrupt you, but like the capital thing, I don't want to like leave that out because that was hard.
So when did that come?
We didn't have, we were just like, we opened one, any money we made in one, like and again, in hindsight, like I was always comfortable with like a high level of risk around like, there were times when I'd have like $17 in my bank account, and we were like not paying estimated taxes. My ex-husband's like, we were married at the time, which clearly we're not anymore. But he'd be like, Lauren, this is not the bank. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's like pretty cheap rate, But like that was stressful. We would do like these hard money loans with people, like where we had a kind of a standard deal where we pay you 10% in 5 years.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. When this is not the bank, meaning your personal finances, like you writing checks to your business?
No, like my bank account, I had $17.
Oh, okay.
Like I'd be maxing out credit cards. I'd go to Home Depot. I'd buy like whatever the thing was, whatever I could charge on credit cards. We did that forever. And then I would not pay estimateds. I'd get the penalties. I'd use that. We'd rob Peter to pay Paul. We'd pull distributions from this one. We'd do and push it into that. Like, and then again, like the thing that was awesome about it was like any money we saved was money we didn't have to come up with. Yeah. So that was highly motivating.
Just real quick. If you're shaking your head, yeah, that's me. I like high risk, constantly in the situation that Lauren's explaining right now. I love the pitch profit first, because I've been exactly in that situation. And as soon as I started using profit first, and I started allocating cash and taking 15% of every dollar earned and putting it into a separate checking account where that's not my money, it belongs to the IRS. Just that simple rule. Twice a month, allocate cash. 15% goes over here. What ends up happening when it comes time to pay taxes, you have more money than you need, and you get this fat check of like, I get to do shit with this. So you get to write yourself a check by allocating it.
I think it's like fundamentally, like Gary Vee, say whatever you will about him, but like he's not wrong. It's like what are you willing to do? Look at you. You're living in a friggin' camper because you know that you're like, I just don't think there's a lot of people who are willing to sacrifice lifestyle, hard work. Like it's a different world now than it was 10 years ago. And it hasn't been that long of a time, but it feels like a whole new time frame of like what people are like. There's a lot more conversations around like work-life balance, and that's cool. That's for people. But if you want to do what we're doing, you, me, other people, like you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to like ride the line. You're not going to get everything you want. You're not going to be able to buy everything you want. You're not going to have like this fancy car. You're not going to eat at the places you want to eat. You're going to work twice as hard as everybody else, and you're not going to be at the parties and the events, and you need to make a decision if you're okay with that or you're not. I just don't think it works without that.
Well, there's also different types of people, and work-life balance works for some people who are, I think, the managers and the technicians of the world, the people that are good at doing a thing, but they want to leave the thing at home or at work when they go home.
Mentally, yeah.
And there's those people. And I think that it's important to have those conversations because you as the entrepreneur need to recognize that you're not everybody.
You will not, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to be an entrepreneur, you will not. I literally like wonder what it's like to be people like that. Yeah. Like have jobs where they clock out and they don't even think about it till they clock back in the next shift. I can't even comprehend it.
Well,
you will never, like you do. And I'm not saying it's bad because I think it's like a really wonderful way to go. I'm just saying for people who want to be entrepreneurs, like you will go to sleep thinking about your business. You'll dream about your business. You'll wake up in the morning thinking about your business. And it's like, I think for me, I learned to manage it, but there was a period of time that was dark, like very dark.
Right. I like to say there's the people who like work-life balance, and then there's the people who like their life's work.
Yeah.
And I'm
not saying like I have a great time. I have amazing friends. I do tons of fun shit. Like what's right behind you is my bucket list. Like I have wonderful experiences. I travel. I take my kid. I do tons of things with them. And like I run it really hard. I redline on my business.
Yeah.
You know?
Man, I'm really loving this conversation. One more quick break to thank our sponsors and we'll be back to pick it up.
We have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that every second and fourth Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, Restaurant Systems Pro CEO Fred Langley is going live to teach you everything you need to know to run a profitable restaurant from soup to nuts. All you got to do is click the link below.
We're back. And you were talking about the capital part was where we kind of ended up going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. But back to the challenge you had of getting the capital because you're constantly overextending and taking risk, right? Is what I heard.
Yeah, we were just like, honestly, we weren't running these like big construction budgets. We were like, we kind of knew the budget, and then we'd be like, oh man, we need $100,000 more. Like, do we know someone who'll loan us that? And like a short-term loan. We would do these deals, like this is years ago, but we would do like 10% deals, pay you back in 5 years. Most of the time we would pay them back earlier, and we would always give them the interest for the full 5 years. So when we needed it, there was always people ready to write a check. You know, and again, like I said, we weren't, neither Craig or I was trying to buy a big mansion, buy big fancy cars and stuff like that. So any money we made in the business, we were like rolling it right back in. And that was, you know, I tell people a lot, like preserve your equity as much as you can.
Preserve your equity. What do you mean by that?
Like, don't be like, oh, I want to live a certain lifestyle, and so I'm going to give away a bunch of equity because I don't want to use my own money. I hear a lot. Like, I do think there's a correlation with your age and how much money you're willing to put on the line. The younger you are, the more personal money you can put on the line. It just is the way it is. Unless you have money coming from family or something, or you've inherited money or whatever. Like, I think as you get older, you have kids, you have a mortgage, that ratio sort of makes it a little bit less.
You can't argue when you're younger. There's one thing you have more of than other more experienced people is time.
Yeah.
Literally, you have more time to make mistakes, to figure it out. You generally don't have as much responsibility and people in your lives that you have to give your time to. Yep. You don't have children. You don't have significant others that share a life with you. You can trade. Time is the one thing that we all have the same amount of in a day. And as we get older, we delegate our time to different liabilities.
Well, and the stakes are higher. You have kids, you have to have college funds, you have a mortgage, you have like a whatever it is. But I also think it's like, you know, I mean, you have less plot twists in your pocket. When you're young, you can have a lot of plot twists. Like you could go do it and you're not going to die.
You can always go home if you need to. For a lot, not everybody. The fortunate have a place they can go to when they fall on their ass where they can dust themselves off and go back out again.
Yep.
And I think that it's important to recognize that as a young person, that like that's what you're trading. You're trading your time and energy for experience and potential opportunity. And
I can't even tell you though, it's really interesting lately though. I feel like the last few years I hear more and more young people like not wanting to, nervousness, or I read this, oh, it's really hard. I listened to this podcast. Like, you know, again, like I said in the beginning, they talk themselves out of why they can't do it versus why they could do it. And I it's interesting too. We're like, oh, I couldn't do that. Or I don't know if I'm just dying to run into someone who's like, I'm going for it, man.
Yeah. I think I kind of rubbed you the wrong way when I first got here, because I was telling you about how I'm trying to talk people out of it, or how like, you're like, well, why aren't you doing it? And I was like, I might have talked myself out of doing it. Is it true? Did I pick up?
You're not rubbing me the wrong way, but I'm just always like very perplexed by this. Like I think there's a level of jealousy I have of like being young, and you know, again, these revelations we have, and you're sitting there like reminiscing about the times, and like there was a while I was like, oh my God, I worked so hard when I was young, and like what if I did whatever? But I'm like, no, dude, I can work twice as hard as I did. If I had no kids, no mortgage, no expectations, my family not depending on me, more energy physically, I'd have like pressed the gas even harder.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I say this, because I think it's like, and this connectivity around like, what do you have to lose? You know,
man, I'm loving the conversation, for the record. Andy talked you up for a good reason. I do want to talk about, the next phase, of when you kind of, you know, you talked about, you identified the capital, right? Was one of the big challenges for you getting the money. And I think you reach a point where in order to get to that next level of like 20 and beyond, that is when your whole business model has to change.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Totally.
And why is that? And this is where people start to say, I think this is where the Alice's come in and say, you think you figured it out and you have to this point, but if you're really trying to get to the next level, you have a whole nother set of problems ahead of you.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of the time I met Andy. I went to ICR, which is this conference that's there's like 1 day of private companies and 2 days of public. And basically it's like an investment conference that they do. And I got up there. I didn't really know anybody in the business. I kind of knew Alice. Hadn't hired a banker yet, and got up there. It was like, I wish I could watch me give this speech again, because it was so asinine in every way. Like I got up there literally, and Andy's in the audience, and he never met me. And first of all, they're like, there's a girl on the stage, everybody, holy shit. Like there's not a lot of women in our business, like running full service restaurant concepts. And so
what year is this when you were on stage? How long ago?
2015.
15. Got it.
And so I get up there and I'm like, hi, I'm like, it's really nice to meet you guys today. I'm like, I'm not looking for any money. Like says nobody on the stage at ICR ever. Okay. And then I just said, we have a team of badass ninjas, and like a bunch of like really, I don't know, kind of silly things. And, you know, but we had really good numbers, and I did put the numbers up there, like plus $1,300 a square foot.
What are good numbers?
Like to do a deal. I'll give you this deck I have that I made for this DoorDash thing I did, where it was like helping people with 5 units try to grow bigger. Basically, like the things that you want to know, you want to do north of $1,000 a foot in sales. Anything above that, I call it like rare air. I'll give you this chart I have. In same store sales, you want to have like +3 at least. If they're newer restaurants, can be even higher than that. You want to have, if you have restaurant level margins of 20%, then you're going to be like, that you're definitely going to get people's attention. Nowadays, like 20% was pre-COVID. Now, if you have 18 to 20 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else is there?
What?
Guest affinity. So like now we can, back then you couldn't really, we would know the Yelp scores was really all they did, but now they'll aggregate all the guest feedback. So they're looking at Google reviews, Facebook ratings, all that stuff. And they'll aggregate that into your sentiment score. So you want to see that be like at least 4.2 and up.
Okay. What's that scale from zero? Like, is it 0 to 10?
No, 0 to 5, like 5 stars. You know, like most of the places have 5 stars. What else do they look at? Like cash on cash returns. How much does it cost you to build out? So pre-COVID, it was like, 35% was great, 35 to 40. Now it's probably 30-ish, 25 to 30.
Percent of what?
What it costs you to build. So, and how quickly they can be paid back. So, in COVID, like because the construction costs got so expensive and rents got higher, and then cost of everything just went up. And so generally speaking, like those numbers have moved a little bit from the deck I'll send you. Like they're not quite as big as they were, because like when you look at our build out used to be 2.1, now it's 3 million.
Wow.
It's crazy.
In terms of the profitability to get over 20%, again, a lot of our listeners are at the single unit locations or scaling to try to get to 10, right? In that ballpark. What were the things about your concept that make them profitable? How did you reverse engineer them to be profitable?
You start with the value to the guest first. It's counter to what you just said, and it's a cardinal mistake that people make. And my team even does it. They'll be like,
"What
hey,
did I say?
You said start with the profit. Like, how do you get with the profit?
Reverse engineer with the profit. So
I don't do that.
So do what?
I do make great food and serve it and make a great value, and then you figure out how to make money.
So create the value first.
100%. And people love, even my team will be like, hey, we made this item of this food and it's like 13% food cost, and I'll eat it. I'm like, yeah, it was shit. Like,
tastes
no one's going
13% food
right.
cost.
I don't do that. I say make great food and then go cost it out and come back and tell me how much it is. And if we've got to alter it, or like we need to be like, oh, we need to use less of this thing, or we need to get a different ingredient. But you start out with a great product always. And it's like, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. Andy would probably tell you the same thing. Like, biggest mistakes that restaurateurs make, or they start having food cost problems, and they do skimplification, which is like the shrinking the portion, increasing the price.
Right. They manage the bottom line, not the top line.
That's right.
And if you can create something that's truly unique and valuable, and you can only, if you're the best at it, people will pay for it. But you also have to like factor in the margin of what you need to make sure you can do it over and over again. Like don't be ashamed to charge what it's worth.
And like, know that some things just don't make sense. When we were early on and we had $5 wine by the glass, every single one of our wines by the glass, we didn't change that price for 23 years. In 2020, we finally had to raise it to $6 because we just couldn't do it anymore. Right. But even though still $6 a glass, every one of our glasses of wine, and $6 pitchers of beer all day, 7 days a week until 5 o'clock.
Right.
You can't buy a drink in our restaurants more than $6 up until we rolled out alcohol.
So if you focus on creating value first, what was it about your concepts that's valuable?
We knew that like this whole thing, this was like a lifestyle. You know, I'm showing you this, like, drinking wine at lunch is not a crime bumper sticker, which is from my business partner, Craig, who's like a crazy skateboarder. You probably recognize the skateboarding is not a crime. Okay. Part of like the Postino thing. Yeah, here.
Yeah, definitely.
I got all kinds of stickers for you. Yeah. Part of like the thing with Postino was we wanted people to come in and use it in this European way of like, you have a glass of wine with lunch, you know? And we thought that if we did that at a price that was approachable to people, and they would maybe take a risk on trying a new varietal that they maybe hadn't had before. It was only $6. And if you don't like it, we'll give you another one. So you always start with value to the guest. And then that started driving this like crazy busy lunch periods for us, and like people using this, like you'd see people in the afternoon and happy hour and coming in, and on the weekends like mimosas, brunch, like $6 wines, like it's a thing, you know? And so does that make sense on paper and on a spreadsheet? Probably not. I know it doesn't. And then one of the big arguments Craig and I ever got into, he's like, hey, it was 2007, like the economy had taken a huge shit, and he was like, we got to keep our servers busy. And we said we were dropping off the cliff at like 8 o'clock on a Monday and Tuesday. So we're like, let's do board and bottle, $20 for any board of bruschetta and a bottle of wine. And it became this institution that people still to this day like follow. And that one we kept for a long time too, like 20 years. We raised that to 25.
Nice. Do what you just did with profitability and getting like creating a value, right? Reverse engineering value, to keeping the cost of like the other variables, like how to keep your expenses low, like your cost to build out. What else did you mention? You mentioned like your infinity, your profit over 20%, your infinity rating, your build out cost. What were the other things you mentioned?
Same store sales. That's a huge one for investors. That's basically like, about, right? Well, it is and it isn't. Same store sales, it encompasses a ton of stuff. Like, do people want to come back, really? And so private equity investors, VCs, they look at that because they think, you know, does this brand consistently produce increasing same store sales year over year? And if it does, that means that it has high affinity and people like it and they keep coming back and they're building sales and they know how to manage their business. It sort of is this like unicorn of a metric. Like if you do a deal with a private equity, VC, the street is like crazy for same store sales, you know? And that's like probably the number one thing they track is like, are you higher sales than you were last year? And then they do that then they'll start to break it down like through traffic or price increases. And everybody's been putting through like tons of price increases. So it's a little bit like, you know, artificially swayed, which is why you'll hear a lot more talking about like the street, and like they'll be saying more about like what's traffic. Okay, great. Whatever your same store sales are up, but what's traffic?
What do you mean by artificially swayed?
Well, your sales are going to go up because you raise the prices. Right. So like I told you, most everybody's if you stack the last 3 years of price increases across the restaurant industry, it's substantial. substantial. And so like you're kind of like maybe doing the same amount of volume, but you're charging them more. So your same store sales are higher, but that's why they'll break down like what of it is traffic. And they want to know, is your traffic higher?
And how do they cut through that noise?
It's kind of different for every company, but you want to be tracking checks. Like we track it through guest checks, but some people track it by like body count. Like they know, or like they're just transactions too. They can do it that way.
Got it. Okay, so we're at this point in your career where you're like, look at this beautiful child that I have, this baby that I've raised, and you bring your child to these people, and they go, no, that's an ugly baby. What was it about your baby at this point that was ugly? That was an opener to you?
It really wasn't. I mean, that was the thing that we were finding out. We're like, oh my gosh, like we got a tiger by the tail.
But you were saying Elliot was like, she like jarred you a little bit.
She jarred me because we had no infrastructure, and like we had 7, 8 stores, and she's like, you have no infrastructure, you don't have any capital.
What infrastructure were you missing?
No CFO, no finance team. We had a very light ops team. We had light everybody, and so we had no HR director. We had no like training people, and we were opening all these restaurants. It was like kind of crazy. Yeah.
This is why you need to typically go get outside investment to go from 10 to 20, because there's a whole C-suite of people that you need on to hire to get to that next level, and they all come with multi-6-figure.
I'll give you an example. We had at that point probably like 10 people above the restaurant that were doing some job above the store, and then now we have 74.
Wow, all making probably $75,000 or more. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. And so it's like significant. I mean, that's like Stack to Grow, right? Yeah. But like still, at that point it was like, here's the other advice she gave me. That's the second piece. If I leave you with nothing else today, like raise money before you need it. And I listened to that. Yeah. And she said to me, like, go do this now, because if you wait until you're like the wheels are coming off of this thing, you're going to have to be a lot less picky about who you pick to partner with. News alert.
Like that advice applies at opening your first restaurant and going to 20 from 10, because I think the number one reason why restaurants fail out of the gates is because they're undercapitalized.
100%. People, my friends that aren't in the business, but they're business people, always ask me like, why do they go out of business so fast? And I'm like, because they think they only need the money to build it, and they need like 7-8 months of cash operating just to like
runway.
Well, and the discipline of like what this thing takes. Like you start running a couple payrolls, and you see like we cut $1 million of payroll a week. It's just nuts, and it gets really big really fast, and you get over your skis real quick. And then you start going on terms with all these. The thing about Craig and I too that we did was like we paid everybody that day. When you rolled in with food or whatever it was, we paid everybody that day every time.
Why?
We did that because we didn't have P&Ls when we were up till 4 restaurants.
But that's also a great lesson that if you don't have the cat, like don't ever get in the hole. Like
right.
If you don't,
we were never in the hole.
So back to profit first. If you take your profit, you take your owner's pay, you put money aside for tax, what's left over determines what your operational expenses
and then
are.
Wait till the end of the quarter before you disperse, because you're going to get punched in the nuts with some kind of surprise.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We didn't have a P&L. We would pay everybody right away for everything. Then we would we would pay all the payrolls, and then we would wait till the end of the quarter and a couple weeks after.
You guys had 10 locations?
We had 6 before we started running like actual P&Ls.
Okay. So let's talk about infrastructure. Not necessarily the corporate team, but like you guys weren't looking at P&Ls when you had 10 locations?
6. We started doing like we ended up partnering with this outsourced accounting company that helped us really professionalize the business at that point. We weren't looking at labor, and we were making so much money. Like it just was crazy. Right. Like we just had the thing was so tight.
Top line revenue does solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything we haven't discussed in terms of what you started doing differently to be a beautiful baby through inside
like ready
and out.
For that.
Yeah.
I wish some of the things I wish I would have known is like really, and Andy taught me this, was like, he came up to me after that ICR presentation. He's like, I want to know you. You need to meet a few of his private equity buddies. And he made some introductions for me, and you just start breaking this out. But he said something to me, that I don't know why I never thought of it. He's like, Lauren, the thing you need to know about private equity is their sole job is to take $1 and turn it into $3. And when you do this deal and you pitch them, you have to paint a picture of what you are going to do to take $1 of their dollars and turn it into $3. And I think like going into that, in my mind, I wanted to like talk about all the things we had done in the past and like how great the concept was. And that's all fine, but that should be like 10% of your pitch. 90% of your pitch is creating a story for like this $1 going to $3.
Yeah.
And that's like, for me, it was like it was a big disconnect, right? It was just like, here, let me tell you about how great my team is. And
you sell the culture, not the other side.
I needed to, I could have, and we did great, but I mean, again, hindsight's 2020. I would have like focused on how do I sell this vision of like, $1 to $3.
So what was it about you that Andy said, I need to know you if you did such an asinine job pitching yourself?
I'm probably being like hard on myself. I don't know. Cause I think he's just him. I think the numbers were pretty good and he had a wine bar. And so
he wasn't listening to what you were saying. He was looking at the numbers.
No, I think it was both. I mean, I'm probably being hard on myself. I think that he was interested because we were a culturally focused company. We cared about people. We had an interesting brand. We had a wine bar. We had numbers to back it up. It was also in the sweet spot of like, totally. And it was like I think we were in the sweet spot of like what Hal and Jacob from Rosser Capital like to pick up deals that are in like that 8-unit-ish.
You also had a taco concept, which probably made him really happy.
There was a lot of similarities in what we had been doing on the West Coast to what they were doing on the East Coast, for sure.
That's what he knows.
Totally. But the thing, Andy, and people would always say to us like, oh, he's on our board. I mean, he'd be like, is this a competitor? I could give you the playbook for how we do Postino, and he would, and like it just wouldn't be the same.
I've thought about going to Andy with Restaurant Unstoppable and saying, do you think, like, how do I scale this thing? Because I'm at this point where you were, where I need infrastructure to do the stuff I need to do. Because living on the road full time and trying to record 4 interviews on site and edit the video and do all that stuff, I'm like, there's things I know to do. I wonder if there's like an opportunity to have restaurant people invest in Restaurant Unstoppable. This vision that you shared earlier that I want to create to like literally bridge the gap and to make mentoring possible for the restaurant industry.
I think you can get like pretty big scale sponsorships. Like I'd put that with it. Like to me, I would map out what's missing. And in my mind, there's not a lot for people like you're onto something with this like sector of the business. It's like what Andrew's doing from Savory Fund. He like specifically targets businesses that are 5 units, 8, 10 units, sometimes even 3. Sometimes he's bought a couple that are 1. But like, there's not a lot of people that do that because they're hard and they have to build all the things that we just talked about. And then you have these consulting companies that are huge, they're crazy expensive. And if you're not like we were probably still too small to really afford them. And so there's not like a place to go that you can, unless you're actively doing this yourself. And I was like an animal with it. And I don't think most people have the time or desire or ability or skill or whatever to like, to build this. I was desperate, I was like already pregnant with this thing. I had to go figure it out. And I think that's the benefit of being female too. We just have an easier time asking for help. But like if you were to build something that made it somehow create access for people to get to the people who are really good at real estate, to get to like post questions or like go through training, and like the world's so different now with AI and digitizing like access and virtual stuff. Like, I just think I'd start with the problem. Yeah. And the problem is that there's no solutions for people that have small companies.
Yeah. Cause they're priced out of it. Mm-hmm. You can't get those consultants. They just don't have it. Like they're living off 5% profit and they're trying to figure out how they're going to pay mortgage and their employees. They don't have nothing left on the bone for themselves, let alone to invest and help.
Yeah. So then you like, you map it out and say like, okay, where would they go? They have to know somebody to introduce them to somebody. And like, I do a lot of this stuff to the point where like, I tell Philip, I'm like, I can take 2 slots of time to like look at someone's P&L or look at their development plan or whatever it is, because otherwise I'd fill up my weeks and not do my own business. So the challenge you're going to have is like, how do you get these people to help? And like, everybody wants to do that to some degree, but we all have day jobs too. Yeah. That's the hard part.
Man, I could talk to you for another hour. Aww. I really could. I've really enjoyed this. This has been fun. We have to think about wrapping it up. We've gotten to where your business is today. We didn't really talk to where you are today in terms of like how many total locations do you say?
We're killing it, man. Living life, having fun.
32 with 7 more to open than the next year. I feel like that's maybe. I would love to get you back on the show in 5 years. We can pick up where
I'm definitely gonna have more gray hair. I remember Sam Fox telling me one time, he's like, Lauren, going from 20 to 30 is no joke. And it has not been a joke. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. And he says to me, like he'll openly tell people like, you should talk to him too. He's so brilliant.
I had Jasper Regan Jasper on the show. He was awesome.
He's great. He's been with Sam since day one, pretty much.
I shared the whole story. It was actually the interview just before yours.
Nice. Yeah. He's great. He's been my mentor for so long. And he's like, he's crazy successful and he's got the science of this thing like down, and he's a creative, like, he sold that deal to Cheesecake Factory and like didn't have to go do this afterwards. And I was so perplexed by him. Like, I knew him really well, and it was like this culmination of like this unbelievable legacy. And like, and then he kind of just started over doing this hotel and like this other and the 1230 Club. And he actually won this award last year at the UCLA, and he didn't want to do a speech. And so they called me and they said, he wants you to interview him. And I was like, all right. And I went around and I'm like, I got to kind of what you're doing, like learn about this person enough, like, to know what has made them successful by other people. And so I did that, and like was crazy. Like what I found and ultimately came to the conclusion is that when you're cut from this cloth like we are, you just have to make stuff.
Yeah.
It's not about the money anymore. And even like, you know, a big part of what's made him and his brilliant, beautiful legacy is like how much opportunity he's created, wealth for his team, all those things, but also like this craft of like, he just has to make things. Yeah. And I identified with that so much because it's like, even there's times when like, you just got to take something out of nothing and make it. And that's like so painful sometimes. And there's days when you're like, literally your eyes are bleeding and you're so tired. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to like muster up this ounce of energy, but somehow you find it.
Right.
And somehow you got it, like get it. And then you just iterate and ideate. And like, you know, I walked in on it one day in his office and he's like, got these like 50 towels all over the table. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm trying to figure out which towels to put in the thing. And I'm like, well, just pick one. And he's like, no, dude, I got to take it home. I got to get it wet. Like that maniacal attention to detail. And people just think he's rich, done well, has some good ideas. Dude, he is like obsessed with details.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you think the industry is going? If we talk about where you are today, you know, how you got here, the only thing I want to find out is like your idea of like, where are we headed?
You know, I'm like a little bit rainbow bright over here trying to be like, I love the restaurant business and we're not broken. Where are we going? I think it's going to be really interesting to see it's harder to do business now. I will admit that, like Rainbow Bright can admit that, so but,
what are you doing to evolve to be relative in the future?
I think the experiential thing is important. Like I just fundamentally believe that people will never stop. It's what you and I talked about, wanting to sit across from a table from each other and celebrating moments, like wanting to go on first dates. Like you can't, what are you going to do a Zoom on a first date? No way. I just think there's parts of this that
as somebody who's doing digital dating, that is what happens. And it's the worst.
Is it really? Like you do a FaceTime first?
You literally like, yeah.
I could see that though, because it's so expensive to go out. You know, that's like 12% of our customers are what they call striving singles, which are people between the age of 25 and 38. And they're actively on a dating site and they're coming to us because Postino, you can come in and have a glass of wine. There's no pressure to order food. If the date's going well, you might order some food. If not, you're like, it was really nice to meet you.
Well, this is fun.
The server's going to follow along with you. And then so for whoever's paying, you know, that can get expensive, man.
Sorry. Yeah, for sure. But back to your train of thought before I derail the dating thing. So like, what are you doing to evolve?
You know, we're like definitely pre-COVID, we did about 1 or 2% in off-premise sales, and now we do still about 12%. So we really try to make that experience really wonderful for people. And I think a lot of people treat that like a commodity. And like, I think that's here to stay. You know, I think that we'll continue to eclipse grocery store sales at restaurants because people just they're working more, they're got kids, dual incomes, like stuff like that. Right. I think too, like getting really, really obsessed with this lighting, the music, the like overall experience. How do we make people feel? Because there's so many great restaurants now that it has to be about this symphony of like all of this experience, and it has to do with that. I think too, for us, we're a 23-year-old brand. Like I'm 44 now, you know, and I don't know that there's not many cool 44-year-olds. It's like, how do you continue to like let that thing evolve and to like let other people influence it? What does the art look like? How do you think about the design differently? Like, but then at the end of the day, like, I think it's like, don't get too far away from trying to like, to be too different than what you're already doing, because it's just this sort of, I mean, dude, you look at Pompeii. I remember going through there and you see people sitting at a table. It's not really that different.
Right.
You know?
Along this vein of focusing on creating the experience, the subtle things like the lighting and the space, where do you go? Who do you go to for inspiration in terms of the experts on this subject? Are there authors, books, firms?
Rick Rubin is like, if I could meet him, like if you told me like that question about like, who can you go have dinner with? Rick Rubin. Like, I don't know, Rick Rubin. Like, he is just the most amazing creative. Like, he works with me, but the way he looks through the lens of the process of creativity, like, I think that we all as creatives like get obsessed with what the end result is, and like, did someone say that's great? And what he is focused on is like this process, and who's involved in the thinking of the thing, and like letting the process unfold, especially when you're in our world and there's these deadlines and I got to get this thing done. Like, my team knows when I start getting pressured with like something's not right, I'm like, I got to think about this, or I need to like walk away from it or whatever. Sorry. And he just articulates that in a way of like, you just got to like think about that and enjoy that, and that very nature of you have to get his book. His book is incredible. Like, it's right there. I read it almost every day. I'll open it up to like, let's just read a page and see what comes up. Do you want to play it?
Sure. Wait, oh yeah. Awesome. We got some, I don't know. Rick Rubin, don't sue us for reading your book without permission.
Is that a thing?
I might be. I don't know.
Well, do you have to bleep it out if it is?
But I think Rick Rubin's kind of like a hippie, so
I highly doubt. Cool, okay, I'm just going to tell you, I always turn to the page and I'm like, I'm a hippie. See the crystals? Like,
yeah. I mean,
I think every day when I read this and I open this to summary, I've read the book all the way through, but like I'll open the page and it's like something that I need to pay attention to.
Maybe this might be my
You're going to shit when you realize the page I've turned this to. Okay. Based on our conversation. Okay. Are you ready? Talent is the ability to let ideas manifest themselves through you.
So his big thing, are you keep going or are you just going to read it?
A little bit. Let's go. Inspiration. It appears in a moment, an immaculate conception, a divine flash of light. An idea that would otherwise require labor to unfold suddenly blooms in a single inhalation. What defines inspiration is the quality and quantity of the download. At a speed so instantaneous, it seems impossible to process. Inspiration is the rocket fuel powering our work. It is a universal conversation we yearn to be a part of.
Yeah, this is the power of now. This is being present and just literally listening to the inner voice, the you, and just and letting that manifest through you.
I think it's knowing like the guttural thing. Like I think in our business too, we know when something's not right. Like I can literally walk in one of my restaurants and be like, something's off in here. It could be because the leadership's off, because like something's going on in here that shouldn't be. And I think it's like, or I'm going down the wrong path, and it's like paying attention to that guttural feeling of like I'm not on the right framework. I gotta like shift. I gotta pivot. This isn't cool. Like, or we spend time convincing ourselves it's someone else's fault. Our guests are crazy, whatever it is. But like, I think that knowing when you're like, this isn't right. And if I'll find myself like greenlighting something and it's like cringy. I'm like, oh, I know I don't want to do this, but I have to because we're on a timeline or like a thing, and it always blows up in my face.
Yeah.
Always.
It's weird. So I almost mentioned this earlier. You mentioned God, like Rick Rubin or God, right? And you said that, I think you talked about the power of we're always creating, like, and especially entrepreneurs, they have to create. Like you were talking about Sam Fox, he has to create.
It's air.
What's that?
It's air.
What do you mean?
You can't live without it.
Right. I think that's back to the fact that like, it's instinctually human. I think one of the things that makes humans so unique is that we literally, like, what other species has this creative ability like we do? We make things better. We look at what was given, like we stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us, and we say, I can do it better. Mm-hmm. I can do it better. I can do it better. And it's just generational. We have to take what was given to us, find inspiration from it, and make it better. And like in many ways, bringing God back into the subject. I'm not a religious person, but what is the definition of a God? It's literally somebody who creates. It's a creator. Yeah. And we're made in his image, right? When you look at words, they're powerful and how it all ties together.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, my team knows this too. Like it's this acceptance of like the status quo or it's the not. And you kind of like what I see in myself and other people, or like when I'm going through like a lazy phase, I call it, in my own mind, it's like, this is like, I'm going to accept that this is what it is, or I'm going to get after it. And they know, like, they'll give you an example. This thing, we had toast and, there was this like really weird guest path and I didn't like it. And it was like really confusing to people about how they were tipping. And like, we would get these guest complaints and they were like, well, it's just the way it is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, and I called my IT guy. I'm like, Brian, who do we know is the highest up person at Toast? And, I start pulling this thread and they're just like, they're going to maybe do that update one day. I'm like, no, they're going to do the update like nowski, because like we have a 3-prong problem. And I think about this, if there's a problem that affects our guests, our revenue, or our employees, it's a 911. And guess what? This problem affects all three, so it becomes a triple threat.
Did you get a solution?
Dude, this is why they tell me. And it's funny because Anoop's like, Brian's annoyed and stuff, and he'll love that I'm telling the story. But like, he calls and he's like, they're not going to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And Anoop's like, you need to let her go do this because like she has confirmation of having done this and it moves the needle. Yeah. So I make a video, like I know in my mind that I have to create a compelling story to Toast to get them to understand what I'm seeing and why this is a problem. And so long story short, I like make the video. I get on the phone with Kelly, who's an amazing person at Toast. I show her the video and she's like, oh, wow. I'm like, yeah. So because when we do board and bottle, they come in and they see the screen and it says, do you want to tip 20%? Well, the guest thinks they're tipping 20% on the $26 discounted when they're really not. They're tipping 20% on the $80 original total. And so they get home, and these are a lot of value-driven guests, and they've now tipped $16. So even if they call us, which most of them probably won't, now I know you're pissing off my guests. Now if I toggle the switch back to tipping off the net amount, now I'm going to piss off my servers. Oh, and by the way, I have to refund all those tips that people cost. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So I explained this to her, and she's like, no problem, Lauren, we'll get it sorted out. We'll put the update through in 2 weeks. Oh, I was like, oh, swing, oh, like Simba, like in the air, and Anoop's like laughing. He's like, just you get confirmation that you can move the needle. And like, I'm just not here for this. Oh, that's just the way it is. Cause it's always been that way.
Who said this? I heard it recently. If you want to be able to predict the future, create it. Do you know who said that?
No, it's really great though.
Oh man, it will come to me.
I literally, with every fiber of my being, believe like anything's possible. If you told me like, Lauren, you have 3 days to get to talk to Joe Biden, I'd be like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Like I'd figure it out.
I've really loved this conversation. You're a fast talker, so I think we can close out these last 4 questions I ask all my guests.
I was really trying to talk slowly on this. Did I not? Mission
I mean,
not
if you're
accomplished.
listening at this episode at times 2, good luck. That's all I'm saying. Good luck.
Too. I found a diary when I was little, and it was like my goals, and it was like wear my retainer, put my zit medicine on, and talk slower. And I was like, well, it looks like I'm still doing all 3 of those things 40 years later.
Oh man. So 3 questions, actually technically 4 questions, but I think you're going to answer them quick on your instinctual. So let's just fire them. What's one thing about your business, your values, your process, your systems that's truly makes you unstoppable? A value, a process, a system that's uncommon that makes you truly unstoppable.
We're never satisfied. Like our whole team is just like, it's never good enough.
Insatiable. The mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. How have you personally transformed? Who are you today versus the woman you were when you got started?
I mean, I'm pretty proud of the fact that, like, I don't know many women that lead and founded a full service restaurant company that have led it and then led it through this level of growth. I'm hoping to meet Lindsay Snyder, who runs In-N-Out Burger. Like she came through that, like her parents started it, but there's not a lot of us. And I think, and being a founder and like still running my company at this size is pretty awesome. And I think like kind of macheting through the forest for people, because like it's funny when I tell people this, like many people told me I would not be running this company. I've gone through so many meetings of like people looking at me like I'm Craig's assistant, or like, and this look of shock on their face when I've told them like how big my company is. And they'll be like, oh, did your husband start this? Like if I give you the like stuff people have said to me, which I don't even like, that goes in one ear and out the other. I don't have time for that. But like, I think like showing people how to do that. I have a kid, I'm a single parent. Like, I didn't get this money from people. And so showing people the way and like sharing what I know, like very openly about how I did this.
It's pretty amazing. And you should be proud, but I don't know if I caught the transformation. How are you different today because of it?
I'm way more calm.
Got it. Like
I have had to, back then, like I would really let a lot of things bother me and I'd get really like upset or something would happen. Like this business is fundamentally like a punch in the junk every morning. Like you open your email and you're like, or someone doesn't show up, something's broken, something falls apart, a guest is upset. I could list like 3 hours of stuff. And I used to let that really affect me. Right. And now I think it's like I have this relationship with that stress. Like stress is a choice. Yeah. I believe that. I saw this guy present and he was like telling us his life story. And he said, the one thing you're supposed to share at the end of the story, like what you had told your younger self, he said stress is a choice. Yeah, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, damn, dude, I'm giving like all of this energy to being stressed, or like what I make these things mean. And then also what goes on between here and here in my working hours. Like we're fundamentally given a finite amount of energy in the day. And when I connected the dots to like, I'm going to control what I do with that finite amount of energy, and like I'll use an example, like this is like how much energy you're going to get for the day, right? And then imagine like 200 shot glasses all over this table, and each one of them represents like thoughts, actions, whatever. Like these are like, oh, this is really hard, this is unfair, so-and-so didn't treat me right, they're treating me like this and blah, and like that's like sucks, like what a jerk of a guest, blah blah. These over here are like, who do I know that's built a big restaurant company? How do I fix this problem? How can I solve that? Like maybe I need to talk to this person. And now when I ask you the question, like where are you going to pour this finite amount of energy in? It's freaking crystal clear. Right. You'd pour them in here, but we don't do that because this type of behavior, thought, narrative is much more comfortable for us to think about than it is to do these active execution mode things. Right. And so the moment that I like figured that out for myself and was like, I'm going to be maniacal about like controlling where I'm pouring this energy into. And I still go through phases of it. And when I do, I put a big, huge hair rubber band on my wrist. And when I start going to that side of the shot glasses, I literally snap it to have like a physical disruption of like, I got to get out of that mode and stop giving that my energy and get over here.
Yes. I love it. Last question. You ready for it?
Yes.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants will be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Take the high road.
1.
Have fun.
2,
Take care of everyone around you.
3. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for this recommendation.
Love
were
you,
spot
Andy
on.
P, if you're listening.
And that's really how I want that to be my North Star. I don't want to be the one who decides who I make an example of. I believe success recognizes success. And I really, one of the big reasons why I'm living in this camper is so I can go chase the people who are being referred to me organically. So who do you respect and admire? Somebody, if they were a guest on the show, spending 2 hours spilling their guts, you'd be like, ooh, I want to listen to that.
Anywhere in the U.S.?
Anywhere
like
in the
you
US.
want people that can go deep?
Yeah. Or willing to go deep.
In the restaurant business?
People who are deserve to be made an example of.
Oh. Rick Federico, for sure. He lives here. He's a lovely human. Also, Russell Owens, actually, who used to work with Rick, he is a titan also of a human. He worked with Rick at Chang's and then rolled out. He's opened 36 restaurants a year in his entire career. He's unbelievable. He now works for Sam Fox and has worked for Sam for a long time. He's had like 3 really, really incredible growth stories. And he's, they call him Yoda. So he's kind of shy. I don't know like how deep he would go, but he's like very knowledgeable. Sam is awesome. I'm giving you people in my market because you're here.
Thank you. It's kind of the whole idea of being able to stay indefinitely.
Yeah.
Well, we're over time.
Chris Bianco.
Ooh.
I got more. Just give me 1 second now. Chris Bianco. He's amazing. Joe Johnston. He started this really crazy, like he basically made Gilbert like out of nothing. He's a really cool dude. He's got a really cool
Joe's
family
barbecue,
story.
Right? He's got a few things.
He put Joe's grill in Joe's Farm Grill in his childhood home. He's very interesting guy.
That was his childhood home?
Yes, Joe's Farm Grill.
It looks like it would never be a home. I walked past it. It's like, it looks so commercial now.
I know. He built on, it does this crazy volume, and then he really, they farm that land right behind there, and he lives in one of those little houses over there.
Oh, really?
He's really, really, really an interesting guy. Nice. I'm sure I'll have more for you.
Rick, Russell, Sam, Chris, Joe, look out. I'm coming after you. And I just can't say thank you enough. I literally could not do what I do without people like you. You make this mission possible. Thank you for your vulnerability.
Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine.
You guys watch out. This was a double ginger podcast.
Yeah. And if we want to follow you, social handles, if we want to join your team, is there a website or your email we can go to?
Yeah. The team is upwardprojects.com. There's a link there, and then has all of our open positions. And also for me on social, Lauren Bailey LB.
Beautiful. And this is episode 1085. You can find the episode there if you can't remember all those details. Just remember that number. And there is no questioning, Lauren.
1085? Yes. You've done this 1,000 times?
Over 10 years. Yeah.
Do you have repeat guests?
I actually just started doing that recently. Yeah.
What year did you start this?
2013.
Damn.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you. Well, I was just going to say there is no questioning. You are unstoppable. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.